He spent his life risking everything inside deadly dungeons, dreaming of nothing more than a quiet home, a loyal dog, and a peaceful future. Instead, he dies on the deepest floor and wakes up in another world. A mysterious arrow is constantly pointing him toward a fate that could destroy everything around him. All he wanted was an ordinary life, but this new world keeps dragging him toward something far greater. Can a man who never asked to be a hero finally find the peaceful life he's been chasing? This story begins with the protagonist, Naruhito Toyama, brooding as he awaits the next monster. Several years have passed since the sudden underground formation of a dungeon in Japan in 2028. Its name is Babylon. People from all over the world gather in this land for wealth and fame, and he too is one of them, an expeditionary or explorer. A person with such a profession kills animals, searches for treasure, and thus earns a living. You could say he's a modern-day criminal. He could be called a veteran. In this field, where many die, but all this talk about the past. At that moment, a huge ape appeared before him and attacked him on the spot. The protagonist shouted to his friends, "Run!" Then he turned to the beast and shouted, his opponent is him. Meeting the monster's attack, he engaged it in battle. But in his excitement, he didn't notice the appearance of another beast, which pierced him with its enormous claws. But MC still managed to give his opponent a good beating. And now, looking at the pool of his own blood, he grinned, thinking he'd missed one. Looking back, he wondered, had they escaped? He gazed thoughtfully into the distance and said, house. He'd always wanted to build a house by the lake. Imagining the scene, he grinned, noticing how nice the view was. Suddenly, he remembered, exactly, the computer hard drive. The protagonist slowly walked forward, the monkeys following at a safe distance. He showed them the middle finger and said, there you go, you stupid monkeys. Blood dripped from his wound and he thought, he's really in trouble. He's going to die like this. Build a sauna, get in before the birds start singing. Cool his body in the lake, get some freshly baked bread. This was the kind of house he wanted to build. No need to show off. Build a house, and yes, buy a dog, preferably a Shiba Inu, but any other breed would do. A large, soft-furred dog. Eat delicious food, have fun, drink, and also, he didn't want to die here. His strength began to leave him. He collapsed on the soft grass and noted how good he was as a researcher. It wasn't for nothing that he had become a top-class professional. The interesting stuff was only just beginning. He didn't want to die. He didn't mind killing animals. He'd gotten used to the smell of their blood. He trained hard enough to kill effectively. It wasn't hard for him to remember that. At worst, he was a good runner, as they say. Killing animals is making money. Stealing treasure is making money. No wonder he was dying now, after so many murders. If only he could run away faster. Trying to crawl, the protagonist thought, he became an explorer to fulfill his dreams. He realized that life isn't exactly a bed of roses, but still, he believed that a bright spot would come in his life. Even so, death couldn't be avoided. And today was the very day where he went wrong. But when? When did he accept the quest? It was a fairly simple request. Or when did he protect his friends? Or when did he make them? Or when did he become an explorer? The protagonist grinned and said, it was fun. Fighting, killing, getting money, eating delicious food. No, next time he won't make a mistake. He won't act rashly. He'll use his ace up his sleeve. Suddenly, reality seemed to shift, and water gushed over him from all sides. MC summed it up. Here comes a natural phenomenon. He's definitely going to die. At that moment, the radio went off. His friend screamed. Can he hear him? They're sending people to him now. They're safe. Thanks to him, Hina's alive. The main thing is that he holds out too. The protagonist replied that he didn't have time. Let him listen to his request. The friend replied, I'm listening. The protagonist told him to throw away the hard drive from his computer and the books with the elves. The guy exclaimed anxiously, what kind of nonsense is he talking about? The MC, growing weaker by the second, managed to say, that's it now. He trusted him to get rid of everything unnecessary. Laughing, he added, he won. It was fun. Next time will be better. He'll build a house and open his own store. He'll have more freedom, money, food, a dog, a family. At this thought, he cursed and was swallowed by the water element. That's how everyone learned that top-class researcher Toyama Naruhito died on the second floor of the dungeon due to a natural disaster. The support team failed to find his body. The next day, special forces were sent to find his body. No one knows where the protagonist is now. After some time, the protagonist, looking at the glowing beacons, thought in bewilderment, what is this? He's definitely dead. Can he hear something? A large divine hand took him by the shoulders, and a woman's voice thanked him for having so much fun in her little garden. He was the one who could have become it. He, of course, wasn't the one she meant, but he was very similar in that he didn't like to lose and had willpower. This was the place where he would end. But would he be satisfied with that? Fine, she would allow him to continue existing, but not here, not in the world where he lived. He shouldn't worry, there was a place that suited him perfectly. After all, he could become the one she was talking about. She couldn't wait to find out what would happen to him there. She wanted to see him become that one as soon as possible. She would give him a gift that would make his life easier. A guiding arrow would help him. His life would continue in another world. He couldn't see the speaker. Only her long, blonde locks floated in the air. System messages appeared in the space. From version 1.0 to version 0. Adopt domains and available resources. Adopt exploration abilities. Exchange acquired skills for skill. Error. Adopt use of crushing weapons. Love of dogs. Corresponding killing ability. Otaku. Positive attitude. Combat thinking. Girls. Hopeless. As a gift. The sacraments of the Catholic Church. Mark quests with a love of bad endings. At that moment, the space changed, and he realized he was sitting in a cage on the floor, with shackles on his hands. Across from him sat the lizard Lazar, staring intently at him. MC thought in bewilderment. What? Then he looked at his shackled hands, looked around, and thought, is this a dream? He noticed a cursor in the space and, surprised, noticed an arrow. Lazar spoke. Finally, he woke up. The protagonist stared at him in confusion. The cursor hovered over the lizard's head. He tried to make sense of what was happening. He had died from a severe wound and been caught in a natural disaster. But when he came to his senses, he found himself in a strange place and saw an arrow. He looked again at the cursor hovering over the lizard's head, and the word slave appeared above it. He wondered out loud, astonished. Are they serious? Lazar said again, finally coming to his senses. He tried to get through the checkpoint too, and gotten caught, right? They were being transported somewhere now. Sighing, the lizard added, they're unlucky. MC continued to stare at him in confusion. Lazar handed him some bread and said that if he wanted, he could eat the bread he'd baked. The protagonist's reaction didn't change. He wondered what was going on. A word appeared above the arrow. Conduct a dialogue with the lizard slave. Lazar interpreted his confusion in his own way, sheepishly apologized, and said it must be disgusting to eat what the lizard had cooked. The protagonist said, if possible, he would. An exclamation point appeared above the arrow. After he chewed the piece he'd bitten off, the lizard happily asked, did you eat it? He replied, confused. Was he not supposed to? Lazar said, no, that's not what he meant. MC took another bite and said, how delicious, really. The lizard smiled sheepishly and clarified, really? Really? He's pleased. The protagonist noticed the cursor had disappeared. He asked Lazar, where are his handcuffs? Suddenly, a guard yelled at them to be quiet. Lazar almost whispered, he has good hearing, so there are beastmen. He used a lockpick to remove it. The protagonist was surprised. Wow, he thought, what an interesting dream after death. The lizard continued, glad that, even if it was the end, he'd met a good man. He even thanked God for it. MC responded with confusion, but he was the good man, sharing his bread. Suddenly, the cart stopped. He asked in surprise, have they stopped? Lazar replied, they've arrived. He should be careful. Beastmen are very hot-tempered. When they were unloaded from the cage, the protagonist looked around in surprise. Indeed, there were beastmen everywhere, in addition to the human guards. He noticed two girls talking to each other, and noted their cat ears. They must be sisters. A guard grabbed him by the shoulder and said, he's here. How heavy he is. The protagonist obediently followed the order. Continuing on his way, he was surprised to see that they were indeed beastmen. Suddenly, Sean called out to him, ran up to him, kicked him in the chest, and exclaimed indignantly, wasn't he the one who was just checking out the girls? How dare he even look in their direction? MC doubled over in pain. Sean's comrades laughed and started praising him. He was good. He beat him in one go. The protagonist, sitting on the floor, noted in surprise that it even felt real. It hurt. 2 more times, and he'd break. Lazar helped him up and asked solicitously if he was okay. It seemed they were adventurers. The protagonist thanked him for his help and asked if adventurers were the kind of people who hang out in the guild. The lizard man replied yes, and they were their slaves. He said in surprise, wow, this is quite interesting for a dream. Lazar remarked that he should try to keep only good memories in his heart. They had no right to even go near them, so he should be on his guard. Listening to the others' conversations, MC wondered in confusion, what kind of strange dream was this? Was he really dead? He thought he heard the beastmen's cry. Their luck had returned. It was on their side now. Sean started to bother another slave. He kicked him and rudely said, here, otherwise he'll kill him. The protagonist remembered someone telling him something when he was on the verge of death. At that moment, he heard one of the adventurers rudely tell Lazar to move. The lizard was about to reply that he understood, but the adventurer slammed his fist into his head, sending Lazar flying a good distance and hitting the wall. The protagonist glared at the offender and thought, hey, another one. The adventurer shouted at the lizard to shut his mouth. The second adventurer noticed he was hiding something. With that, the lizard's bread was taken away. The adventurer remarked, wow, so he passed Commander Ron's test? It's a shame to turn him into trash. Did he want to chew it himself? The lizard sheepishly replied, no. If someone was hungry, then to feed them. The adventurer stepped on the pastry with his foot and mockingly exclaimed, what could be worse than bread held by the lizard itself? Lazar hung his head and said regretfully, it's his bread, the one he made. His assailant mockingly repeated, he made it? Did everyone hear him? He baked that bread himself. How disgusting. The adventurers and guards laughed. The MC approached the discarded bread, picked it up and said, it's a shame to throw it away. The lizard asked in surprise, what? The protagonist brushed the dust off the crust and began eating the bread. Everyone looked at him in amazement. He chewed, as if nothing had happened, and said with a smile, it was delicious. He looked at the lizard and asked, is there more? Lazar, with tears in his eyes, replied, no, that was the last one. The protagonist stood up and said, let him bake it. He'll pay him. The lizard called out to him in bewilderment, but the MC, without turning around, walked up to the adventurers and said, "This is the third time. They're annoying him." The adventurers stared at him in confusion. Sean, confused, asked, "What the hell was he saying?" The protagonist, glaring at them, continued, "Those who throw away food are trash. They're the worst, even if they step on bread. He's an explorer, so he exterminates beasts like them. He decided he wouldn't compromise his principles. He would live by them. He would do it even in his sleep." The Beastman sarcastically asked, "What the hell was he mumbling about? Did he want to get punched in the face?" The protagonist winced, waved his hand, dispelling the smell, and mockingly replied, "He should take a shower." The enemy became truly enraged and shouted angrily, "Who the hell is he to behave like that?" MC activated his power, broke the chain on the shackles, and, poking his fingers into the enemy's eyes, scornfully declared, "How cheap." The Beastman clutched his eyes and screamed in pain. He added, "Don't let go of your weapon during a fight." Picking up the axe from the floor, he concluded, "One down." He then swung, struck another adventurer and said, "Second." After that, he approached Sean, grinned, and noted that he was the one who had struck him back then. Now he would get his revenge. Sean raised his sword to strike, but the protagonist intercepted his hand and then plunged the weapon into his body. Sean looked in bewilderment at the sword protruding from his chest. The protagonist grinned, "An eye for an eye, a solar plexus for a solar plexus." The enemy collapsed, dead. The cursor reappeared with the inscription, "Objective completed. Defeat the adventurers." "The main objective, escape," he remarked. "What a convenient thing." Lazar said he was shocked. MC asked, "Is he injured?" "It's time for them to hurry." The remaining beastmen, armed, formed a wall in front of them. Someone shouted, "Kill him immediately." The protagonist grinned and noticed, "Are they already aiming? They were so fast." The lizardman called out to him anxiously. He replied that he had nothing to worry about. He wouldn't risk his life anymore. After these words, he activated the infusion, and instantly the space began to fill with a thick shroud. The adventurers were perplexed as to what it was. Even their sense of smell had worsened. Why had the fog appeared so suddenly? Even if it was Hellel's tower, it was only the first floor. One of the sisters, armed, told the other to stay close. Lazar looked around in confusion. MC said they needed to go while they could. He replied, "I understand." Retreating to a safe distance, the protagonist exclaimed joyfully, the plan had worked. They needed to run quickly. Lazar agreed and asked in surprise, "Did he see anything in that fog?" The protagonist replied, "Nothing, just the arrow. It's the game's marker, and by the way, it's very convenient." Suddenly, they seemed to slip and were carried downstream by a stream of water. The allies screamed in surprise. The speed was high. At this moment, Peggle bowed to Alice, who was sitting on the defeated monsters, turned to her, and said, "It's about time." Farron, the head maid, also bowed and announced that her armor was ready. Alice, jumping off the monsters, said, "It's boring. If this boredom is going to continue, she should pray to an angel for someone to appear to dispel her melancholy." Sometime later, MC petted the dog and said that he, like himself, has no home. The puppy yapped in response. He said, "If it's okay with you, I'll take it." He even called him by name. After this, the protagonist opened his eyes to Lazar's voice. The lizardman asked, "How is he? Is he even breathing? Does he recognize him? He'll have to excuse him, but he'd like him to wake up." The protagonist looked around, glanced at the nearby waterfall, and asked in confusion, "What is this place?" Lazar replied, "It's a strange place. He doesn't know." MC spoke in confusion, only to wake up again when he fell asleep. "What is this?" The lizard said, "He needs his help here." He asked, "With what?" Lazar pointed in one direction. When he looked in that direction, he saw a huge giant with one eye, an arrow above it, and an update message. "We need to defeat the giant." The monster growled menacingly. The protagonist remarked, "It looks like they won't be friends." Lazar asked, "A cyclops?" The enemy swung for a blow. The protagonist covered the lizard and said, "Watch out." After that, he laughed and said, "If he gets hit by him even once, he'll be finished." Lazar asked, perplexed, "What's so funny?" He replied, "Well, it's scary and interesting, isn't it?" With these words, he threw an axe at the monster. The cyclops looked at him in surprise. MC, looking at this giant, smiled and thought there was no need to throw a weapon. What should he do now? At that moment, a man in iron armor appeared from somewhere to the side and finished off the monster with one blow of his trident. The protagonist exclaimed in amazement, "Oh damn." Alice, without removing her helmet, asked what kind of idiot smiles in the face of death. She landed on the carcass of the fallen enemy and added, "It's boring. It won't even do for killing time." He clarified, "She's serious." The lizard was in shock. She finished off the monster with one blow. Even for adventurers, that's hard. She looked at him, approached, and noted in surprise, "Really? This is their lizardkin. They became slaves and escaped?" Lazar seemed to even turn pale, fell to his knees, and prostrated himself before Alice. The protagonist looked at him in surprise. He said, "That can't be true. She's a dragon." The girl grinned and remarked, "Is that so? Quite well." He quickly figured it out. "This man, is something wrong with him?" The lizard grabbed his ally's head with force, forcing him to bow, and exclaimed, "What is she talking about?" The MC was indignant. It hurt. What was she showing off for? Lazar replied, "It's better to let him go now. He was definitely their man." This was a dragon in front of them, a top-class adventurer. She knows the wisdom of this world. Alice said, "Well, he shouldn't praise her like that, although she wouldn't mind." Then she turned to the protagonist and said he smelled bad. He was embarrassed by this remark. Her aura made him feel uneasy. Alice said, "It's very interesting that they were able to get rid of the shackles." He replied, "Aha," and mentally noted, "This pressure, what is it? A monster?" She said, "It's more interesting up there now than down here." He asked the lizard, "Maybe this really is a dream." Lazar whispered. Please stop acting like that in front of her, Alice said. Enough. She thought of something interesting that would kill her boredom. He thought he had a bad feeling about this. The lizard asked, "What is it?" She replied, "Now they will fight to the death. She will free the one who remains alive and pull them out of this place. She swears by her name." An arrow appeared in space with the inscription, "Update your goal. Kill the lizard and free yourself." Lazar asked, perplexed. "Fight to the death?" Alice spoke. She wouldn't repeat it a second time. "Ah, so that's it. They want to see their reward with their own eyes? How cunning they are." With these words, she showed them the amulet and uttered, "The church's sign of return." With this alone, they could free themselves from the stigma of slavery and survive in this tower, and perhaps even find a place in her city. For them, slaves, this is what they dream of most. She will give it to the winner. The protagonist, perplexed, asked Lazar, what was she talking about? The lizard said thoughtfully, "If he has this amulet, he can become free." The eider tossed him the blade and said, "And so she gives this to him, the clever lizard, for he needs a weapon. This is a small gift from her. Let him use it. This is her knife. Let him accept it properly." Lazar took the weapon and, in a voice trembling with emotion, uttered, "The dragon's knife." Alice shouted irritably, "Come on, let them begin. Let them fight, let them kill, otherwise they won't survive." The lizard gripped the hilt of his blade and jumped back a distance, preparing for battle. The protagonist couldn't believe his eyes. Was this really not a dream? Was this even possible? The message appeared again. He needed to kill the lizard slave and survive. He needed to finish him off. Alice exclaimed, "What's going on? If they both don't start, she'll kill them both." MC remembered the bread Lazar had made, and his words about wanting to give it to someone in need. No, he didn't want to kill him. The lizard threw down his knife and said he wanted to build his own shop by the lake. Just his shop. It didn't have to be big, so that his best friend could come and eat the bread he made. He'd had that dream. He had, but today it had come true. It was the first time someone had eaten his bread, and even said it was delicious. He fell to his knees, covered his face with his hands, and added that he didn't want to die. But he was so glad that his dream had come true. He was ashamed of himself for even thinking about killing his friend for a second. He didn't care what would happen to him. He thanked the heavens for sending him such a person. He was very good. He was even angry that his bread had been thrown away. He was a good person, and he confidently declared it. Alice responded that it was so boring. He hadn't lived up to her expectations. She hadn't even thought that he could treat such a chance like that. Too boring. Well, it had to be over. With these words, she threw the amulet at MC and said, "Let him rejoice, he won. Let him take it in his hands and say his name. If he is a man of this world, it should work." He, taking the amulet, asked what she would do with the lizard. She replied, "It's only natural. Of the two of them, only one will survive. He should leave quickly. His death will be the reason for his life. He should accept this." The protagonist chuckled. She angrily clarified, was it her imagination, or was he laughing at her words? He thought she was scarier than anyone he had fought before. Looking at the dejected Lazar, he said, "Let him raise his head." But the lizard bowed even lower and began to beg him to leave before it was too late. The protagonist looked at him with a smile and said, "He shouldn't say that. After all, he didn't even know his name." The lizard was silent for a moment and then said, "Lazar? No last name, just a name. He is a dirty lizard, a kind traveler." MC told him his name with a smile. Lazar asked in bewilderment, "What?" He added, "His name is Naruhito Toyama. He is an explorer obsessed with dungeons. Let him give him his hand." With these words, he tossed him the amulet. The lizard caught it with surprise. The protagonist extended his hand over him and, addressing him by name, said he would have a business conversation with him, and he liked that sort of thing. Lazar replied, "Wait," but the protagonist waved his hand and said, "Go ahead, and tell him to try not to come back." The lizard addressed him by name in amazement. The MC turned to Alice and said, "Now he'll deal with her." With these words, he clutched the arrow in his hand and noticed it had been pointing incorrectly from the start. The one who must die here is none other than this dragon lady. A message appeared in space. The main quest had been abandoned. The current course of events had been destroyed. An arrow appeared above Alice's head, and the system notified him of the emergence of a new hidden quest. Alice dismissively remarked that he, a slave, was very unpleasant to her. The arrow issued a new quest, hunting a dragon. He replied that she shouldn't worry, he would enhance this feeling just as he desired. The system notification appeared again, an update on the quest objective, destroying the dragon. Alice grinned and noted that she could praise him. Never before had she seen someone so confident in his abilities. He laughingly asked, "What's wrong?" Just recently, he'd been in high spirits. She looked very much like someone he knew. The chief researcher. She asked in confusion, "Who's the chief?" Although it didn't matter to her. "Let him be prepared for death, because only one will survive," he retorted. "If anyone survives, it's definitely him." Alice laughed, and for a moment she couldn't stop. With each passing second, her laughter grew more sinister. Finally, she said, "Enough." With these words, the girl activated her fire skill. A powerful conflagration erupted all around. The protagonist remarked, "Fire, no, heat. What a problematic weapon. It would be a bit of a hassle." Alice grinned and said, "He's keeping his cool. That's just great. He's not letting her get bored." He steadfastly endured her magical attack and laughed. "Idiot, she's the victim." The protagonist activated his skill and thought, for a land that had dungeons in 2028, this is something that can mock the laws of physics and chemistry. All preparations are complete. People called this phenomenon fine particles. He said aloud, "This is what changed the world. It's time to work on dispersal. Let the fine particles fill with blades." A thick haze formed in space, enveloping Alice. He continued, "Lucky she was standing on the windward side. The blades are spread out over a 50-meter radius. He needs to disperse the fine particles of the blades into the air. And even with armor like hers, it won't be possible to defend herself, right?" Alice screamed. Her body. It hurts so much. Make him stop." MC laughed and exclaimed how much fun he was having. The enemy's equipment had melted so badly. He looked at it and said, "What armor?" And it felt like his stomach was turning inside out. Emptying his stomach, the protagonist grumbled. He hadn't felt this bad in a long time because of such a sight. Well, at least he had won, and this feeling was definitely not a dream. At that moment, the arrow reappeared above the dragon. The eider seemed to rise again, a bright glow appearing above her. After that, an explosion was heard, and the silhouette of the dragon became clearly visible in its place. Returning to her previous form, she staggered and exhaled heavily. Her entire armor was riddled with holes. The protagonist noticed. Hadn't he told her? He mixed fine blade particles with the air. Had she really forgotten about that? These blades penetrate the body and begin their work there. Weakening, the dragon said. Excellent. He looked at her grimly and commanded the particles to kill the dragon. Approaching her, he asked, what should he do with her? Although, why hesitate? He wouldn't be able to sleep tonight unless he finished her off completely. Picking up the blade she'd thrown to Lazar, he said, "Excellent knife. Isn't this hers?" He's giving it back to her. With these words, he plunged the weapon into her body. Alice's body began to gradually dissolve. Looking at this picture, the protagonist noted that it was unpleasant to watch. An arrow appeared above her, followed by a notification, a dragon hunt. This hidden quest had been completed successfully. The dragon attack skill had been unlocked. This dragon species had been saved. MC looked at the dissolving body one last time and said, "Finally, he's done." He said goodbye to the armor. Meanwhile, in Heller Tower in Agator, considered the southern territory of the Empire, something unpleasant was happening in the Adventurers Guild. The governor of the southern territory, Magrave Sapan von Tichy, exclaimed in bewilderment. What? And why was this happening in his life? Hysterically, he fell to the floor, clutching his head. Haidamari, who had entered his office at that moment, remarked in surprise that he was making too much noise. With these words, she struck him on the head. Sapan exclaimed in a pained voice, "How timely, the guildmaster!" The girl apologized for her actions. She hadn't meant it. The governor, rubbing his head, said, "Excellent blow." Lying on the floor, he accidentally glanced at her legs and closed his eyes, afraid he would see her underwear. Haidamari calmly said, "Black today." She would record these words of his in the minutes of the meeting. Sapan cried out, "No, he's asking her not to do this." She noted that it wasn't always possible to catch him in such a state. Instead of answering, he pointed to the table and said, "Fire of the Chosen." On the table, in a candelabra, stood several lit candles. One was extinguished. He continued, "The lamp, the fire of the Chosen Ones, reflects the state of life of the highest adventurers guild." Haidamari began counting the burning candles and said in amazement, "There should be 7 lights, but there are only 6. Sapan, sipping his tea, replied mournfully, "Exactly," and he responded in kind. They were both silent for a moment. Then Haidamari said, "No. 1 dragon is dead." The steward, choking on his tea, cried out hysterically, "They are the strongest, the best of the best, and one of the 7 lives has been extinguished." The guildmaster said, as far as she knew, they had gone to Heller's Tower today. Sapan noted with confusion. He had to report this to the capital now. But why did this dragon die? Hysteria overcame him again. Haidamari grabbed him and held him close. He instantly fell silent. She asked, "Has he calmed down?" "And now, from the very beginning," the steward said, embarrassed. "Did she just grab his neck? But he's higher in status than she is." The girl said decisively, "First, they need to send top-class adventurers on a mission to find the remaining dragons." He replied, "Yes, please." He thought the emperor already knew about the death, but he himself didn't know the cause. Haidamari looked at the reports and said there hadn't been a dragon death in over 200 years. There had been one during the Great War. A fire dragon was killed. But after its restoration, it certainly took revenge. It would be easier if they only had 1 life. But they were immortal after all. Also, the Empire would need to be notified of the Dragon Festival. She thought it would be best if they were the ones to report it first. Sapan noted, but Alice would be back soon. The guildmaster approvingly said he'd finally taken up the task. As far as she could see, he wasn't taking it seriously until he was put under pressure. The steward replied sheepishly, well, what else could he do? He didn't like being scolded, but he was almost done. Nothing could be worse than the death of a dragon. Haidamari wondered, watching Sapan's jubilant movements. Had she misheard something, or was there some strange sound? After a while, she said, "She has good news. A top-class adventurer is here." He exclaimed, "Well, he'll never turn down good news." "Who could it be?" Haidamari said with a smile. They could ask her to take on the fallen dragon's case. A former archer from the hero party, Mistress Van Verbana, the steward, his stomach growling loudly with fear, said he didn't want her. After a while, Sapan, releasing a carrier pigeon, paused for thought. 3rd century, year 28, month of flower bloom, 12th day. On this day, an event occurred that shook the entire empire. A group of dragon priestesses. This is what binds the empire and the dragon world together. And one of the 7 dragons died at the hands of an unknown person. Mourning death and promised rebirth. A dragon festival is proposed to commemorate this event. The empire has decided to hold it. As a result, the Empire's economy immediately boomed, from the Merchant Guild to the Adventurers Guild, from adventurers to various establishments, from the Red Light District. Soon, the entire Empire knew about it. Meanwhile, in Agator, in Heller's Tower, Van Verbana appeared on the first floor. Alice lay near the waterfall pool, thinking how boring it was. Too boring. Everything was so simple that nothing interested her anymore. She remembered the moment when, after yet another destruction of a serious monster, Peggle had said, "Excellent as always," and to do it with her eyes closed, that was the pinnacle of her art. She opened her eyes and noticed it was him. The butler asked if she was in a bad mood. The girl, hugging herself, replied, "A fairy tale." The fairy tale her mother had told her had lost its meaning for her. She always thought that life was fun, and that this world had so many things she could do to amuse herself, or rather, things she could fight for and win. That's what her parents said too. But it's not true, the butler remarked. He thought her parents wanted her to enjoy her life, and that she was still too young to think like that. Alice replied that her mother had told her the same thing, but nothing interested her anymore. It would be better if she knew nothing, the truth about fairy tales and about weak people. She just needed to keep observing. In that case, this world was no different from the world of dragons. What could she do to kill her boredom? The clergy were boring, the knights were weak, and so was the royal dragon cult. No one sensible among humans fought her, they just worshipped her. So who were the adventurers, the heroes? As far as she knew, people created their own heroes, right? Then maybe she should destroy this world. Her eyes lit up with madness at these words. The butler calmly replied, "No, she wouldn't do that. Not that." Alice remarked then, "Let him tell her how to fight boredom." After a moment's thought, Peggle said that in his opinion, a human would quench her thirst. She grinned. A human? People are all the same. But what they have in common is that on the tongue is one thing, and in the soul, another. They speak with servility. Oh, she is their dragon. And in themselves, they think it sounds terrifying. They say that she is beautiful, but think about how cold her eyes are. They make her sick. She remembered the words of the guy when he told her not to rush, and that he would do as he wanted. She sat down on the floor, looked around, and said in surprise, "Was she dead?" No, it was he, the guy who killed her. With these words she laughed, and noted how interesting. At that moment, footsteps were heard. Without turning around, Alice asked, "Van Verbana, is that her?" The adventurer stared at her in surprise. The dragon grinned and said, "She's back." Sometime later, returning home, she ordered Peggle to find her a human slave with black hair. Smiling, she added, "He's the one who killed her. If they don't find him, the dragons will sever their ties with humans. But if they bring him to her, she promises that the bond between the dragons and the Empire will be eternal. She'll also reward them with her collection." After a short while, almost all the adventurers rushed to search for the requested item. This is how the economy grew. It practically meant that if the dragon dies, they can have everything. However, the man they were looking for was still missing. After a while, she asked Peggle, "Which one is this?" The butler replied, "The 12th. But the problem was that 4 groups had already brought fake ones. She grinned and remarked, what hypocrites they were. But still, her killer was hiding very well. This man would be hers. At that moment, the protagonist shuddered and felt an unpleasant chill run through him. And time passed, and the protagonist returned to the scene of the battle. He crouched next to the dragon he had killed, and the arrow, frozen over it, gave the command to butcher the carcass. He said, "That's it." MC folded his hands in a prayer gesture and said, he prays that she will never be reborn. Then he began to examine the body. Sorting through the items, he said, "A huge spear, a robe, golden armor, and here's the insignia. Is this a token?" As he could see, this thing is also gold. Tearing it off, he remarked, "All right, he will take this for himself." While examining it, he didn't immediately notice the crocodiles behind him, looking at him, sticking out of the water. The protagonist finished his inspection, picked up the amulet Alice had tossed them, and said he'd keep it. Still, he was taking a risk. The blades were good, but he was barely keeping up. It also depended on the air. Preparations took time. He was lucky the lizard had fallen for her words. He thought that the enemy's relaxed posture, his unawareness of his trump card, and his fighting without regard for the atmosphere, all these factors had led to his victory. And now, with this amulet, he could get out of here. Incidentally, it was his first time killing a human. It felt like, finally, no different from when he'd killed monsters. The influence that the vastness of possibility had on him was dangerous. It stripped away all boundaries of reason, and a person, slowly losing his mind, became an explorer. The vast dungeon intoxicated a person. 3 years spent as an explorer had completely transformed his brain. Examining the amulet, he wondered if it was a dream or reality. This time, he wouldn't die. Everyone would see he'd live. Clutching the ornament in his hands, he shouted his name, but nothing happened. He tried several more times, but all in vain. Falling to his knees, the protagonist said, "It was all in vain. Maybe this thing just didn't work." Suddenly, he heard a gurgling sound. Turning around, he gasped. Enormous crocodiles were approaching him. He asked in confusion why they'd crawled out here. The monster suddenly opened its mouth and let out such a roar that the protagonist jumped up, exclaiming, "They're aiming right for him." And what were those sounds? It seemed they were drawn by the scent of blood. He shouted to them, "If they want meat, it's right here." With these words, he pointed to the dragon's body. The monsters snorted and rushed at him. MC took off running, exclaiming, He's finished. Do they prefer the living? He urged himself on. He needed to run faster. There were so many of them. Having gained some distance from them, he activated his dispersal and blades. A thick, dense fog appeared around him. He cursed and said, now he can't see anything either. Where's his arrow? The cursor appeared at that moment, displaying a message, the start of a side quest, or perhaps a joyful reunion. Further on, there were some signs marking their arrival. He exclaimed, hooray! Even though the signs were strange. At that moment, a crocodile snapped its jaws next to him. The protagonist flinched in surprise and cried out, what? At that moment, Van Vierban's voice was heard. The girl said they don't use sight or hearing. It's their ability, infrared heat radiation. He screamed, are they friends of snakes? Or are they snakes themselves? He summoned his blades again. The adventurer asked him to stop and prompted him. She's warning him to bend as low as possible and dodge. The protagonist happily followed her advice. The girl exclaimed, excellent reaction. After that, she summoned Hawk's Eye, Privilege, and the use of wind power. She had one point. She called her wind magic Mars and spoke in his name with a disguised voice. And now, in Mars's voice, she said, combat effectiveness assessment, taking into account the possibility of destruction without injury. M66 weapon, for the destruction of living targets. Sire's call sign is specially taken. After that, the girl activated panic and fired the bow. The arrows, describing an unimaginable trajectory in space, began to hit the target. The protagonist exclaimed in confusion. Is she kidding? Is that a bow and arrow? The weapons continued to destroy monsters. She said in Mars's voice, check enemy's condition, increase combat effectiveness. She shouldn't get so carried away. The girl remarked with a smile. She and he would have gotten along better. After that, she asked the protagonist if he was injured. He was very lucky. MC stared at her in bewilderment. Van Verbana extended her hand to him and asked in surprise. What? He asked. What the hell is going on? She noticed Mars's negative features. Black hair, brown eyes. After examining his appearance, could one say he was Japanese? The protagonist, Dumdud, confirmed this. Mars drawled in his voice. Japanese then. The girl asked Mars in confusion. Why the negative? They were analyzing him now? Was he an acquaintance? Although, let him wait, she herself. Looking at him intently, she noted with a smile. So that's it. They hadn't seen each other in a long time. He asked in surprise. Who is she? The girl replied with a smile. This is already the second time the wind has met, but it's the first time they've met him. This tower is truly interesting. Everything about it is jumbled, and that point of similarity. The protagonist asked if she was okay. She was talking to herself, imagining Mars. Van Verbana replied that she was, yes, but there were nuances. Let him forgive her for confusing him. And again, it was a pleasure to meet him. He asked again, who is she? The girl told him her full name, Van Verbana Gilbasor Tox, and added that she was an ordinary traveler. MC tried to pronounce her name, but grimaced when he realized he couldn't. She laughed and remarked that it was unusual to see his face like that. The wind didn't have many memories associated with people. Well, nothing could be done. He remained tensely silent. The girl said that he shouldn't be so careful. She asked him not to throw his blades around. After she told him his full name, he said in amazement, who exactly was she? Van Verbana said, she's his future enemy? The protagonist thought, she's cute. But he asked out loud, what was she talking about? The girl addressed herself as Mars and said that she wanted to talk to him. He could listen too, so please, don't let him get angry. After that, she told the protagonist it would be better not to stay here. There was a campsite nearby. Could she invite him? He asked. What if he answered that he would abstain? Van Verbana chuckled thoughtfully and noted, right, that's the kind of person he was. Then she would immediately state the condition. If he agreed, she would tell him his current situation. And she also had delicious tea. So what? He said thoughtfully. Delicious tea. After that, he agreed to her proposal. When they arrived, he saw that it was a tent with a tent behind it. After a while, they settled around the fire with cups in hand. MC asked what he should call her. She offered him a shortened version, but immediately dismissed the idea, saying it would be a bit scary. The protagonist chuckled. Are they afraid of him? She noted. Only the wind. Right, there is something interesting. Damn elf, I think that's what it was. The protagonist asked gloomily. Is she abnormal? The girl replied. No, she's not. Well, it's time for them to get down to business. In short, he's alive. This isn't a dream, it's an extension of reality. He looked at her in surprise and said, this tea is so delicious. Van Verbana was indignant. Let him not run away from reality. After all, he came from her? Him? If Mars isn't reacting, then he really is Japanese. He noted, by the way, pure Japanese. The girl said she never thought the day would come when she would drink tea with him like this. She couldn't even believe it. For a while, they simply drank tea in silence. Then MC said, he wants to clarify again. He really is alive. Mars replied, that's right, he's definitely alive. Van Verbana noted, this isn't some hallucination caused by his brain. This is reality, just in a different world. This isn't Japan, a completely different place, a different world. It was unexpected for him, she realized. He exclaimed in surprise, so he was reborn in another world? Wow, the same reincarnation that was popular in 2020? The girl noted with surprise. She didn't think he would be happy. The main character cried out enthusiastically. Oh my god, of course. She winced and said how loud he was. What a smile he had. He was a very interesting person, and she thought he would like him. The unexpected news confused his thoughts. He replied, what do you mean? Strange. And who is this for? Him. No, let her tell him better. So he didn't die? But was simply in another place? Those same beastmen adventurers, lizardmen, Lazar, various animals, all sorts of creatures with wings and tails, all of this really exists in another world? The girl asked him to step back. He was definitely injured. Although, he wouldn't understand. He shouted triumphantly. It happened. Another world. This needs to be sorted out. Wow. Van Fierbana dressed herself as if she were Mars and asked, really, is this the otaku? He immediately turned his attention to her. Who said that? He was a bit into it as a kid, that's all. She noticed he was getting more and more amazing. Although, wait, what did he say? MC replied, he's not an otaku. The girl waved it off. No, before that, about the lizard and other creatures. How does he know Lazar? He said, perplexed. They were both placed in the same slave cart. The protagonist immediately tensed and clarified. Does this have anything to do with them? Van Fierbana exhaled in surprise and said, my god, he changes in a second. It's like he has two personalities. Although, what can you expect from a man from another world? After thinking for a moment, the girl said, he won't kill the wind with blades, at least with these light, small ones. He shouldn't act rashly. The wind is no friend to the bandits he spoke of. She simply remembered. He clarified what? The adventurer replied, the reason why the wind won and why it lost. But, he and the slave Lazar? All this only meant one thing. After thinking for a moment, he shook his head and said, he doesn't understand anything. He knows little about her, but she knows too much about him. Why? The girl sarcastically remarked. Does he mean to say he'll use force if she doesn't tell him? How that expression suits him. The wind prefers it. The protagonist, looking at her from under his brows, said, he'll ask one question. He thought he had an unpleasant premonition. He couldn't even imagine killing her. Maybe he shouldn't do it at all? He needed to change the subject. He asked, she calls herself the wind. Wasn't that a bit too self-assured? She answered rudely. So he'd shut his mouth. He cursed silently. After thinking about it, the girl said, ah, Mars. He and this guy are very similar. The protagonist looked at her tensely. She continued, this expression recalling a certain atmosphere. He asked in confusion. What? Van Fierbana asked, and why are his clothes so shabby? Where's the special uniform? He has bad taste. MC replied irritably, he didn't have any clothes to begin with. He woke up and he was wearing this. Why was she picking on him? The girl stretched, kneading her body, and remarked, that's how it is. He won't be able to live in peace. She will let him out of this place right now. He objected. No, he's fine here. He thought how cute. She looked at him carefully and said, still, the wind doesn't like him. A thick fog appeared before her eyes. An adventurer with the power to take over the world. He should live for himself. She won't forget him. She thinks this way she'll make the right choice. He asked in confusion. What? Van Fierbana continued, remembering that he'd be joining the guild later. And besides, he couldn't use that seal as an amulet. The protagonist responded, understanding what she meant. He thought the armored girl had said something similar. She said that if he was from this world, he could use it freely. She pointed out that yes, it wouldn't work with otaku abilities. He exclaimed in irritation. He wasn't an otaku. Suddenly, noticing a change in space, he asked in surprise, what is this? She sighed and said, she told you that these changes frightened her. She would let him out of here. He wouldn't survive in this tower now. He would live in the city, or rather, in the capital. Everything had to be confidential. Their meeting would be a secret. Otherwise, everyone would worry. Confused, the protagonist asked, what did she mean? Having created her magical power, Van Fierbana said she would send him in one of the directions. No, she would seal him as a memento. MC crossed his arms and objected. Wait, this would harm him. He had already had this experience, she remarked. How terrible. Well, fine, let him try. He was swept away in a whirlwind. The girl said finally that they would see each other again someday. Then, most likely, it wouldn't be her who would be the wind. She would hope. Let him say hello to the guys and the guild, and also to those dragons. By the way, he should be careful with his anemia. It will be hard for him. After all, he is food for vampires and the thread of dragons. He cried out in bewilderment. Thread? The girl continued. Let him say hello to Lazar. It's a shame she won't be able to try his pastries. And let him be on his guard with the crows. Well, until then, it will be difficult, but let him try to kill the wind as he wishes. Until then, or rather, no. Most likely, she is saying goodbye to him. A deep, heavy fog covered her fate. A man loved by a dragon, causing a lot of trouble, but at the same time, beautiful. To him, the damned adventurer, a safe journey. With these words, she waved her hand, and he was carried away by a whirlwind. She sadly told herself, using Mars's words, don't pay attention, has he already told you? He's a dangerous man. Back then, the wind had taken the entire world into its hands, and with such power, one could have reached a god, no, even an angel. But the wind couldn't resist him. This man has a very strong will. He won't stop until he achieves his goal. Sighing, she noted that she hadn't succeeded. The wind would remain the wind. She would remain herself. How he would act was his business. They would have their own different story. Each had their own path to follow. After some time, the protagonist said, well, he will continue to survive. System messages surfaced. A hidden quest. The one who knew his name was freed. Recalling the conversation with Van Fierbana, he would meet her, a high-level adventurer. Exit Heller Tower. The goal was optionally achieved. Now, having received the memory cleansing, The spirits of this girl are accepted 10 times, so a month had passed since the protagonist's wanted poster. In the Adventurers Guild, adventurers were milling around the notice board. Guild Registrar Lily shouted, "Don't push, get in line." Grabbing one, she threw him out of the crowd, exclaiming indignantly, "Who did she tell not to push?" One of the adventurers said in fear, "She lost it." Another adventurer, looking at the requests, grumbled, "Nothing good left." Lily calmed everyone down, explaining something, talking, sorting things out. Suddenly a whirlwind appeared in the room, and one of the adventurers sat. Request was snatched from his hand. He screamed, "His paper." Another one remarked in bewilderment, "The wind. Whose skill is that?" Requests flew through the air. Lily held the headscarf on her head, and a slight panic ensued. The culprit of what was happening shouted, "Damn elf." The protagonist landed on the floor, looked around in confusion, and asked, "What the hell is this place? What is this, a bar?" Mimi, one of the sisters, the very ones Naruhito saw as a slave, exclaimed in surprise when she saw him. A black-haired slave? Everyone present began discussing the very one the dragon was looking for. Could it really be him? The very one? Yes, it was him. He was the one who caused all that chaos, the slave the entire empire was looking for. He was worth 10,000 gold coins. He killed the dragon, after all. Maybe they shouldn't touch him. He was a dud, after all. One look at him would tell you. The protagonist shook his head in bewilderment and automatically noted that he was worth a lot, but 400 million would have been fine. The adventurers continued discussing him. He was dressed shabbily and wasn't at all scary. He didn't look strong. What should they do? One of the adventurers said he'd leave the guild. MC thought, that's great. But what should they do next? Suddenly, Mimi screamed, "Let them kill him! Because of him, her older sister died. She'll give money to whoever can do it. She just needs him dead. So please, let them kill him." At that moment, Alice appeared in the guild, smiling as she said, "How interesting. Someone had dared to defy her orders, though the entire empire had heard her words, right? It looked like they weren't human." She looked at Mimi and asked in an ominous voice, "Didn't she tell you to find him?" But she thought she heard someone yelp, a squeaky cat-like voice. "Come on, let her say something. Who was that?" The beast woman fainted in fear, and not just her but the other adventurers too. Alice noticed, right there. Turning to the protagonist, she said she was looking for him. He thought irritably, her. The girl added, "Every night since that very day, the wound he inflicted, the fear he instills, the heart he pierced, itched so much inside her. Those were sad, lonely nights." MC answered in confusion. "What?" Alice said she wanted to talk to him about many things. Let him follow her. The protagonist activated his power with the blades and warned her not to come closer. Maybe she didn't notice, but she would understand now. She grinned and noted that he meant to say that she was already in the attack zone. She had already learned this lesson. What he was using on her now, he had already done in the past. He stared at her in surprise. The girl grinned and asked, "What was wrong?" "Well, they will figure it out." The protagonist exclaimed in bewilderment, "Wait, how did she stop the blades?" Alice laughed and said, "It's obvious, because he killed her." "Did he do it in the past?" "It was a good experience, and he was an excellent hunter." He irritably remarked that he put so much into the final blow. She replied, "Yes, it worked." With these words, she showed him the scar from the wound on her chest. He asked, "Is she serious?" Alice had said she wanted to meet him, the man who subdued the dragon, her killer, and the most wonderful thing in her life. MC asked, perplexed, "What?" She laughed and replied, "People don't say that? Fine then, she's come for him, for her man." After these words, she smiled carnivorously. The protagonist repeated, confused, "Her man?" The girl chuckled and said, "It wouldn't be good if he remained a slave." She clapped her hands and called Peggle. The butler appeared before her immediately and said, "He listens to his mistress." She gave him orders to double, no, triple the donation to the church for this period. She never thought things would turn out this way, and let him bring clothes for her man. The old man bowed to her and replied, "Yes." Then he whispered, "Is that him?" Alice replied, "Yes, the very slave who killed her, from the inside with blades." The butler glared at him angrily and said, "Is that how her body was scarred by this man?" His gaze radiated such power that the protagonist cursed and barely kept his place. The girl placed her hands on the old man's shoulders and laughingly asked, "Did he see?" The boy had noticed his desire, too. Peggle noted, "Exactly. This is no ordinary slave." "And what was his name?" she remarked irritably. How could a female ask a male about this? He gasped in bewilderment and said that it was the first time he'd seen her like this. MC, looking at them, thought, two monsters. And the worst thing is, this old man is dangerous. The butler looked at him again and said, "As far as you can see, he's been in this business for quite some time. He's used to fighting, spilling blood. Now he understands why he managed to kill the mistress." The protagonist responded angrily, "He's worse than a monster." Alice said enthusiastically, "Peggle." And the protagonist realized how cool he was. She told him, "Right? He's a very interesting person." The old man replied, "I suppose so." "Well then, he'll ask him for a favor." MC noted that he was right in his assumption. He had no choice. The butler, instead of answering, smiled and said, "It's worth a try." The protagonist rose to his feet and said irritably, "That damn guy in armor he killed is still alive, and he turned out to be such a beauty too." The sheer amount of information made his head spin. They should leave him alone for now. He thought about it so he could escape. Alice suggested he get some fresh air. The old man noted that he was now trying to escape from them. That's the behavior of a real person. The girl looked at Peggle in confusion and was indignant. Why? She was all dressed up and ready. Why would her man want to run away? The protagonist wondered, confused. Had she completely lost her mind? He asked out loud, more interested in something else right now. Why was she still alive? The butler sounded surprised. He clearly wasn't one of them. Alice said dragons have 7 lives. Their duty to exist is to leave a strong seed, a progeny, with the one who defeated them in life. In kingdoms and empires, this is what they teach first. He noticed this isekai. He should probably go to the library. The butler looked at him carefully and said, "Good mood. He's an interesting man, and this skill of his isn't systemic. Something bad is coming." Alice anxiously asked what had happened. The old man said her man was confused. It would be troublesome. Looks like they'll have to take him by force. At that moment, an arrow appeared above them, and a message said the quest objective, escape from the guild. The goal to complete, defeat the dragon and his servant. He grumbled, easier said than done. Alice asked the old man not to hurt the MC too much. He was already hers. The protagonist spoke sarcastically, but his personality and manner of speech were the same. She hoped she'd get angry. The girl grinned and replied that if a normal person had said that to her, she would have been angry, but now her heart sank. And for him too. What's on his tongue and in his heart is the same. She covered her face with her hands in embarrassment and added, "Ah, it hurts and pleases." He said irritably, "She's happy, not angry. Is she invincible?" Peggle said she likes it when people speak without hidden meanings. Dragons can see people's hearts. Well, he asks for the last time. Will he go with them? The protagonist grinned and said, he's been told since childhood not to go with strangers. The butler instantly appeared at his side and wanted to hit him in the chest, but MC blocked his blow. The old man approvingly remarked, "That's a reaction, not bad." He even liked it. The protagonist asked, "What's with that speed?" Peggle struck him again with a swift blow and said, "The second time it hit the mark." The protagonist sat down on the floor from the blow and muttered in bewilderment. What? A system message appeared. A failure in the quest to defeat the servant. Route disappeared. The butler summarized. They sorted it out quickly. At that moment, Hidamari, who had arrived with the steward, exclaimed, "Dragon lady and a butler?" Alice replied, "Oh, the owner of the territory and the guildmaster." Sapon's belly hadn't changed in size. The man, offended, asked, "What does all this mean?" Alice said, "They found what they were looking for and are returning. There would be an announcement from the Dragon Embassy in 5 hours. She allowed them to come in and see." The steward replied, "Accepted." Hidamari knelt before her and apologized for the trouble. They would dispose of the adventurers who were currently unconscious. The dragon girl laughed and exclaimed, "No problem. She's in a good mood today. By the way, why is there such a big difference in the adventurers?" Hidamari thanked her for the comment. They would take action today. Alice noticed that she had been mistaken about people before. She was straightforward, the interesting owner of the territory, and the one who killed her. They weren't so boring. Child of change. Well, they would see each other in 5 hours. The butler picked up the protagonist and said they needed to go. He would carry him. Alice objected, wishing she could. Peggle noticed that her whole face was red. Would she be able to touch him? She hesitated. Hidamari and Sapon looked at them in surprise. The manager asked her, perplexed, what was going on. She replied, it was a dragon, a supreme being. Meanwhile, the butler hoisted the protagonist onto his shoulder and said they needed to hurry. Alice was indignant, telling him to carry him more carefully, and don't pick him up. She would do that. Sapon asked Hidamari if he could skip the meeting. She seemed in a good mood. She chuckled and said, he'd better give up. He'd definitely have to today. MC had a dream. He was dreaming again of his friend, Taro the dog. He was his first friend. He didn't understand what he was saying when he barked. Taro pounced on him unexpectedly and knocked him down onto the grass. The protagonist exclaimed, "You scared me." Taro placed his paws on his chest and barked joyfully. He thought that even if the world they lived in was different for them, they were still friends. He trained his friend, praised him, told him how great he was, petted him, and Taro always reciprocated. He looked at him and complained, and they attacked him again, calling him weird. Taro looked at him sympathetically and licked his forehead. The protagonist laughed. Then the dog began running along the seashore, barking joyfully. Then, MC invited his friend to travel together. Onitoba would leave tomorrow. If he was together, they were invincible. Taro barked joyfully again, expressing his agreement. He stroked him and said, "That's a promise." Hearing the familiar sound, he sadly said, "It's time for him to go back. Otherwise, they'll kill him." Waving his hand to his friend, he shouted, "Wait until tomorrow." Taro saw him off, dove into his kennel, and fell asleep. Some hooligans came onto the territory. Seeing him, they exclaimed rudely, "Who is this?" He rushed at them with a menacing bark, defending his territory. They angrily shouted at him to get lost. They began to laugh at him for shaking. The hooligans kicked him and trampled his house. He was hurt, scared, his home was broken. The dog remembered the protagonist's words about his promise. After that, he grabbed one of the hooligans by the leg and began shaking his head from side to side. The bandit screamed angrily, "Get him!" He'd had him, and they decided to kill Taro. The hooligans grabbed him, exhausted, by the scruff of his neck and threw him into the sea, shouting, "Let him swim there!" Then they shouted, "Oops, he's drowned." Taro finally mentally apologized to the protagonist for failing to protect their place. He'd probably be sad tomorrow if he didn't see him again. Pain and fear were nothing compared to his friend's sadness. It was a shame they'd never see each other again. In the white haze, Taro heard a voice. Someone said, he's surprised. There, beyond the celestial plains, beyond the stars, he saw something unusual. There was something in him, in the dog. After stroking the dog, Someone chuckled in bewilderment and said, indignation. It suited him. This woman took everything from him, and he could become his successor. Taro thought he heard a voice. He heard the protagonist exclaim in surprise, Taro? The dog thought he'd finally come. The protagonist looked around, saw Taro's destroyed house and asked, was he here? The dog, hearing his voice, mentally apologized to him for failing to keep his promise. But there was something he could do. The MC asked the hooligans where he was. One of them pointed at the sea and said, he was in their way, so they washed him away. The protagonist glared at them and said menacingly, I'll kill you. Taro mentally addressed him and said, don't bother. He has no fangs or claws, therefore he will become this. Someone again addressed Taro as his successor and asked, did he know that these fangs and claws have a name? The dog rudely responded to the incomprehensible creature. Shut your mouth. Someone continued, he exceeded his expectations. Well, at least there was a name. This technique with claws and fangs is associated with the fog. It's called blades. Taro turned to his friend, the protagonist, again and said that he was watching him through the fog, and someday he would save him, so that he would no longer cry, and so that he would get everything he wanted. He invited him to continue their adventure. MC stroked the dog's head and said his name. Opening his eyes, he sat up in bed, rubbed his forehead, and thought he hadn't had this dream in a long time. Looking around, he saw Alice sleeping soundly at the other end of the huge bed. She had turned to her mother in her sleep and said, so that's it. The protagonist jumped up in bed, fell off it, and said, isn't this bed too big? Who did this anyway? Looking around the room, he noticed in surprise, no, everything here is so big, quite unusual. Waving to the sleeping Alice, he thanked her for the night's lodging and walked out into the hallway. He stopped, rubbed his forehead, and said in confusion, so what should he do now? The butler wished him good morning. The protagonist jumped in surprise and exclaimed, where did he come from? The old man calmly replied, he'd been standing here the whole time. That's his job. MC, confused, exclaimed, what? Peggle said, may I ask where he's going? The protagonist hesitated, then said, come to think of it, nowhere. The butler sighed and remarked, oh, this youth. He suggested he go change, and also his shackles. Peggle activated his magic, and the shackles instantly shattered into pieces, freeing the protagonist's hands. The old man declared, they're no longer needed, and it looks unreliable. MC, looking at his wrists in confusion, wondered in surprise how he'd removed them with his hand or something. The butler said, well, he's off to see the mistress. Then he turned to Farron and told her to take care of the guest. The maid, along with the other maids, bowed and replied, yes, sir. The girls grabbed the protagonist by the arms and told him to come with them. The butler went to wake Alice. After a while, Peggle, looking at him, said, it seems their help wasn't needed. The protagonist, adjusting his tie, replied, he's a community worker. It turns out there are still suits here. The butler asked, has he ever served anyone before? The maids whispered in disappointment, what a man he is. Now that's a man the mistress would recognize, and they so wanted to take care of him. The old man said he had many questions for him. However, they didn't have time. When he stopped at the huge doors, he said, this is the Dragon Hall, a sacred place where important meetings are held. Everyone is already there. The MC nervously clarified, this is the boss's room. The old man, opening the doors, was surprised. The boss? He shouldn't be so nervous. When the protagonist entered the hall, he was stunned by the size, luxury, and splendor. In the enormous room, on a beautiful pedestal, stood a throne on which Alice sat. Below, in the spectator seats, many people were sitting. The dragon girl, looking at him, said in a languid voice, he has arrived, her man. Well, she asks him to come to the center. Let him sit down. Spinamoro, the guild master of the merchants guild, noticed in surprise, looking at him. Black hair and brown eyes. Unusual, Lady Angel. Sapin said, I hope nothing happens. Hidamari noticed, but she, on the contrary, had a bad feeling. And this was that very dragon priest. The protagonist, hearing this conversation and seeing everyone looking at him, thought, what looks? Knosothiel Fjord asked Svi, does she see something? The high saint replied, no, not really. Kran Adasta, a knight of the Church of Angels, fourth of the 10 knights, said dismissively, and only first-class clothing. Alice, crossing her legs, said, well then, she addresses the people who protect her beloved city. Spinamoro, Sapin von Tichy, Hidamari Sniberia, Knosothiel Fjord, Svi Dakmashar, Kran Adasta. The best of humanity has gathered here. She turned to Hidamari and Sapon and said, she's made a fuss in the guild, please forgive her. The Adventurers Guild master thanked her for her sincerity. She added that she would also provide punishment for anyone who dared to discredit her words. Alice replied with a smile. Considering what the guild could expect, she was indeed sensible. She was in a good mood today. Let him invite one of the cats here. They'll hunt a little. MC thought with disgust at how cruel this was. Hidamari bowed to her and said, understood. She'll give orders immediately. Alice giggled, noting that, like a dragon, she couldn't pass up the opportunity. Exactly, she said. If there's a whole family, let her bring them all. She'll make them her playthings. The guildmaster bowed and responded affirmatively, adding that they wouldn't dare disobey her. Alice graciously allowed her to go. At that moment, the protagonist casually called out to the girls and asked, a family then? And dogs too? Everyone looked at him with indignation and hatred. Alice replied, of course, they'll all become food. Dogs and cats alike. He replied that he didn't care about the cat, but why the dogs? Everyone present chuckled. Kanosa thought, well, he's dead. Alice looked at him tensely, then laughed, exclaiming, if he says so, fine, let Hidamari bring just one cat. Everyone stared at her in amazement. What? The dragon, looking at the surprised Hidamari, asked what was wrong with her face. The guildmaster, embarrassed, replied that she deeply apologized and thanked her for her words. Sapon, surprised, asked his comrade, "Who is it?" She replied, "She thinks it's a dragon." Alice, looking at the protagonist, said, "It suits him." He thanked her. Everyone present murmured disapprovingly. At that moment, Cran stood up and addressed him as if he were a slave. The protagonist, looking at him, thought irritably, "What else is there?" The knight spoke, sitting silently and listening the entire time. And who did he think was sitting before him? A dragon defending the empire. The high priestess, he repeated, perplexed. The high priestess? The knight continued indignantly. Normally, he wouldn't be here by now. He grinned. Really? Cran became even more indignant. What kind of behavior was this? He grabbed his sword. MC casually and familiarly advised him to take his hands off the sword, otherwise he was scared. He would go against him, seriously? Unless, of course, he had a hobby, showing off his sword to everyone. Cran simply choked with indignation and shouted with hatred. What is he even thinking? Alice cut him off, aimed her magical attack at him, which simply flipped the knight over, and said it was up to her to decide with whom and how to behave. The protagonist was simply stunned by what was happening. The dragon added, "She's talking to her man. That's why she didn't want to take him, she knew." Canossa turned to her and said, "This foolish man, he doesn't even know where he is. Couldn't she forgive him this time?" Alice looked at her carefully and noticed accurately. Her predictions spoke of a meeting with her man. She forgives Cran. The protagonist, looking in horror at the badly wounded knight, wondered if he was still alive. Canossa continued her appeal to Alice. "This man is one of the 10 knights," the dragon exclaimed. "Is that so? No wonder he's so lucky." And she wanted to reduce him to ashes. "Fine, let them heal him." Canossa thanked her and turned to Svi for help. The chief saint responded to her request, closed her eyes, extended her hands, and began asking the gods for permission to use their mercy. After that, she activated the healer's hand system and directed it at the badly burned Cran. Alice remarked in surprise, "Oh, so she's a saint? What powerful magic she has." Svi responded sheepishly, asking what she was talking about. It wasn't worthy of her praise. The knight recovered at that moment. Svi spread her arms over him and said, "He's alive, thanks to their priestess and their mistress." More quietly and ominously she added, "If he doesn't understand this, she'll kill him herself." The knight stood up silently and, without looking at anyone, sat back down. Alice continued, "Well, they already understand why she called them here, right? This black-haired human slave who killed her. Therefore, he is forgiven for sitting right in front of her, contradicting her, expressing his opinion. She will allow him to treat her as an equal." This knight must have misunderstood, as if a human were deceiving her. Rising from her throne, she summed it up with a happy smile. "So there is only one to whom everything is forgiven. It is the one who killed her. She thinks her feelings have reached them now. Today, she declares he is her mate." MC stared at her in confusion. She continued, "Her brethren, an empire worthy of worship. They will marry this man, and their bond will be eternal." Sapon noted with bewilderment. This was no longer a dragon festival, but a wedding. He turned to Hidamari and asked her for a stomachache. She replied, "Oh, that will be troublesome. You should apologize. The potion is out." Alice said she could understand their confusion. Those opposed should raise their hands, and if none are present, let them show their agreement with their silence. Everyone remained perplexed, silent. No one moved to raise a hand. She looked at everyone with a smile and said, "Excellent. Another pact between dragons and humans has been made. For a dragon, the bond with its slayer is a true aspiration. She will finally find her happiness." The stunned protagonist was about to say something, but Hidamari interrupted him, saying they were organizing their wedding. They'd like to hold a celebratory battle in the arena during the Dragon Festival. Alice thought for a moment, then replied, "Well then, she wants to watch a battle between the guys from the tower and the village. They're not boring." The Adventurers Guild master bowed and said she'd make all the arrangements. Sapon said he'd inform the entire empire. However, he was sure the emperor was very sorry he couldn't attend the celebration. The dragon cheerfully replied, "No problem, he'll do as a substitute." The steward obsequiously remarked, "How generous of her." They were considering it as a kindness on her part. Alice smiled, noting that it wasn't bad, but she'd heard it also affected trade. "Fine, let him use his authority." Sapon reverently thanked her. Spinna rose from her seat. Alice remarked, "More?" The girl mentioned the Merchants Guild. "They'll lower wages at the rental shops. She'll order all merchants to prepare the goods needed for the celebration." The dragon responded lazily, weakly, "Give her more ideas by morning. If they're boring, she'll destroy all her trade routes." Spinna replied briefly, "Yes, she'll do her utmost." With these words, she bowed to the dragon. Alice remarked, "She's counting on her." "Who's next?" Canossa, turning to her, said she understood the situation was hopeless, even if she were wring that knight's neck. But still, if only there were a punishment commensurate with the deed and her responsibility. Alice remarked, "So she thinks she should kill her?" She admired her bravery. She forgave her everything, relying on her prophecy and courage. Canossa declared, "She's glad they have such a priestess." Alice asked, by the way, what she thought of the festival. The girl replied that they would set the table, lower the price of angel powder, and also rehearse a song with the choir in which they would sing her praises. The dragon replied, "Fine, let them finish everything before the dragon festival." The protagonist reflected that the relationship between humans and dragons had been established since ancient times. Dragons on top, humans below. It's a concept imprinted on the souls of humans, but everyone here had forgotten something. Even the dragon. Everyone had forgotten the most banal thing. that marriage requires the consent of both parties. Alice spread her arms and joyfully exclaimed, finally free from the boring cave. She'd been waiting for this for 100 years. What a wonderful day today. She has the best of the best, MC said decisively. He said he won't marry. No, he wants to remain single for a while longer. Everyone was stunned by his words. Alice thought about it. Dragons are isolated creatures. Higher ones, impossible for humans to touch. They live by different laws. And becoming a dragon's chosen partner means the chosen one receives all the love in this world. Humans are not allowed to stand near dragons. Humans desire to be noticed by dragons more than anything. Dragons are holy creatures. This phrase is deeply ingrained in people's souls. And even so, someone showed up who refused. Coming to her senses in amazement, she shouted angrily, "What?" Everyone present cringed in anger. He noticed it was his line. And why did it all turn out like this? There was definitely some mistake. Alice reminded him in bewilderment. "She's a dragon," he asked in surprise. "So what?" Her indignation and surprise knew no bounds. She swayed and would have fallen if the butler hadn't caught her. She said, "Let him excuse her. She'd had a strange dream." "So that's what premarital doubts mean," he said decisively. "It's reality." She clarified, "She's a dragon, isn't she?" The old man replied, "Yes." A dragon asked and was brushed off. He said exactly that. The girl glared at the protagonist and said ominously, "He's misunderstood something." The butler stopped her and looked at the protagonist. He asked in surprise without even getting up from his seat, "What do they want?" Peggle, barely restraining himself, asked, "Does he understand what a wedding with a dragon means?" MC clarified, "And so what?" The butler said, "Everything. This will give free rein to all desires. He's human, which means he too has certain desires. People do everything to achieve their goals. They live for this, no matter how harsh it may sound." The protagonist remarked, "I don't deny it." The old man continued, "So he must understand that by linking his fate with the dragon, all his dreams will come true without exception. Now, let him think. After all, he has the right to choose. Right now, he is the luckiest man." Alice stared at him. He thought in surprise, will he get everything he wants? He remembered the tarot. It promised him to go on a journey together. Lazar wanted to build his bakery by the lake. Then he grinned and remarked, in their opinion, what kind of fool was he? Laughing, he continued, "The most interesting thing about the weekend is the day before it." At that moment, a system message appeared, a test of the existing speech skill. Successful resistance to the prompting arrows detected. All conditions met. The protagonist continued, "For example, in games, the most interesting thing isn't the level you reach, but when you go through different paths to achieve it." The butler remarked in bewilderment, "He's asking for forgiveness. What is he talking about?" MC said, he understood it again. "The most interesting thing about desire is when you try to achieve it." The message appeared again. A new ability had been installed, debate. Now he can resist with words. He continued, "Yes, he will build a house by the lake. But for that, he needs money and studying the economic system of this country. He needs to start working. He needs to understand this world." Everyone present looked at him as if he were crazy. The protagonist laughed and exclaimed, "How ironic. He wants only one thing, but so much gets in his way." Rising from his chair, he added, "It's getting interesting. This is his path to what he wants. More effort, difficulties, trials, the joy of achieving it. It's all his alone. He won't give them anything, and he doesn't need anything from them. He's not interested in what they can give him at all." A system message indicated the start of a debate. The goal is to convince the dragon. Unfavorable turns of events are likely due to less than friendly relations. The protagonist said, and he says it again, he doesn't want anything from them, so let them leave him alone. Otherwise, he'll kill them all. At that moment, a shroud began to appear in space again. Alice said angrily. She remembered. The girl waved her hand to dispel his attack, but exclaimed in surprise, "What's wrong? The fog is thicker than before." The butler rubbed his chin thoughtfully and said, "I see." Alice called out to him indignantly. He stopped her scream with his hand, saying there was something terrible in it. The MC said ominously, "He's warning you. They're letting him go. And it's not up to them to decide but him, and no one but him has the right to take away his freedom." A system message warned, "Persuasion in progress. Use blades." Marie, meanwhile, stroking the pale steward's head, said, "This is a nightmare. A man is threatening a dragon." The protagonist waved his hand and exclaimed, "He has a lot to do." He turned to the butler and shouted, "Get out of his way and leave the dragon alone." The system message declared the debate had begun. Blackmail dragon slaying technique activated. Peggle narrowed his eyes angrily and sighed, "Oh youth." And life is boiling inside him. The protagonist repeated, "Get him out of his way. He has no hobby of bullying old people." Peggle responded angrily, "Damn brat." The MC spread his arms wide and said, "A gamble. He's sure there's a sequel. Time for new games for wishes to come true. And he will do as he pleases. Even in danger, even in death, he won't stop walking his path." The butler shouted with hatred, "Are these his last words?" The protagonist smirked, wondering where his manners were. He finally showed his true colors. Peggle replied, "He's a fool, still young." He attacked the protagonist, but the latter blocked his attack and smiled. Alice stood silently the entire time. The system message announced the debate had been successful. The dragon was depressed. Suddenly she asked, "He doesn't want to be with her that much?" Peggle turned and addressed her in surprise. MC looked at her and honestly said, "Because he doesn't like her." She gasped after his words. He continued, She tried to kill the lizard. She's acting important. He doesn't like that. The girl asked again. You don't like it? So that's how it is? He replied, yes, that's true. Blushing with tension and bursting into tears, she exclaimed, really? Enough. Let him forgive her. She was doing wrong. Peggle scolded her in amazement. What was she doing? Alice, to everyone's confusion, turned away and said she was going to rest, and they should take him to the city. And carefully, the butler, not believing his ears and eyes, asked in confusion, is she sure? The girl replied, wiping away tears. They told her she wasn't liked. She didn't want to hear that anymore. The protagonist was dumbfounded by this turn of events. He even felt embarrassed in front of her. Alice released her dragon wings, soared upward, shattering the glass dome in the ceiling, and vanished into thin air. The butler screamed hysterically. He's asking her to wait. Then he turned to Farron and told her to act as she was told, and he would go after her, after his mistress. The maid replied, okay. The old man used his physical enhancement and soared upward after Alice, shouting her name. The protagonist looked up in utter amazement. The maids began whispering, glancing at him. He made his mistress cry. A great chance, a truly super groom. Haida Marie, absent-mindedly stroking the steward's head, also looked up in confusion. Sapon, coming to his senses, thanked Farron for fanning him and remarked, I should have learned Japanese. Spinna remarked with surprise, exactly. Alice flew very high up and thought that she was told that she was not loved, although she was a dragon. Everything should belong to her. She must choose. She stopped at a very great height and thought, why did he do this? She does not understand. Why does he contradict and deny her words? She cannot forgive this. She asks her heart to hate him and not forgive. Otherwise she will break. She wanted to take revenge on him and thought that people constantly lie and are so easy to read. She remembered what he said earlier, stretched out her hand up and said that it seems that he does not belong to her. She was hated and she does not know what to do now. Bernard flew to her and said that he saw her like this for the first time. They have to go back. She cannot run away from him. She refused and said that she realized that she angered him. She does not want to feel this anymore. Even though she is a dragon, she does not understand, because she can only hold on to everything she wants by force. He called the lady and said that even without the bonds of marriage, there is a way to understand each other's souls. She is the closest to people of all the dragons. She met her killer and has mixed feelings. However, she will go through this stage, grow up, and find the answer to her question. She must not let him go. He is her killer, and he must not be let go under any circumstances. Alice lowered her head and said that she could not do this. She began to cry and said that she had just been told that they hated her. He came up to her, gently lifted her head, and said that she should raise her head. Did she really think so? How is it that a dragon cannot resist one person? Where is her pride? She became very angry about this, and loudly asked the old man, how dare he look at her like that? Who is he anyway? He smiled and said that she was a little girl who hid in a corner because of just one rude word from a man. That's who she was. She swung her hand and thought that she would definitely kill him. She is the oldest and most powerful creature that cannot be read either by movements or by the mind. There is no one stronger than her. She struck, aiming for his head, but he stopped her at the last moment and said that she was too slow. He broke her hand, squeezing it, let go, and she loudly insulted him and asked how he dared raise a hand against his mistress. Bernard said that his mistress was not one to give up so easily. Is she sure of her decision? He does not know how long she will have to try, but he will repeat these words again and again. It is time for her to grow up. He extended his hand and said that the time had come to choose. Will she choose loneliness, like the other dragons, or a different path? She held his hand, loudly asked him to be silent, and said that he hated her and it was not a lie. He must stop. She stops being herself. She doesn't need these terrible feelings. If this continues, he went to her and said that even if she says so, these sufferings and hardships are purely her feelings. She must accept this as a part of herself, like her arrogance, greed, and nobility. She must answer him. What does she want to do with the Dragon Slayer? What does she desire? She was surprised by what she heard and said that she wants to be friends with him. She did many terrible things to him. Because of misunderstandings and her obsessive attitude, he hated her. However, she wants to talk to him and get to know him better. She wants him to call her by name, even if it is awkward. She does not want to back down. She calmed down and with a determined expression asked how she could get along with him. He said that she had an excellent look. Even though she suffered defeats, nothing is over for her. Also, to achieve what she wants, she needs to do only one thing. She must get up and move forward. This is her first test, or rather, her first adventure. She must pull herself together, grow up, and learn. No matter what difficulties she faces, she must move forward. However, if she still wants to gather all the dragons together, she must never lie to herself. Then she must kill this dragon slayer. Only by following this path can she heal her emptiness and get rid of her boredom. Alice's hand quickly recovered, and he said that this is why people go on adventures, and she is a dragon who is so close to people. She simply must see all this beauty. What landscapes does she dream of seeing along the way? She looked to the side and saw the sun rising from behind the edge of the planet. She looked at it and said that she wanted to enjoy this beauty with him. She decided that she would definitely kill him and show him this enchanting view. She thought that her first adventure, although scary for him, will now be looking forward to it. She said that she apologizes for making him worry. It's not that bad. He bowed with a smile and said that's why she is called a dragon collector. Well, it's time for them to go back. She said that she was a little worried. Bernard said that there was no need to worry. He would support her in this adventure. Even if he had to put his life on the line, he would protect her. After some time, Naruhito was lying in a public bath and said, "How nice it is here." After all, he seemed to have come to kill her, but ended up taking a bath in her house. She escaped, and her servants ended up throwing him into this bath. He also remembered that the debate was successful. The dragon was depressed and wondered what he said that even made her cry. He thought with displeasure that crying was against the rules. He did nothing wrong. It's better to just enjoy the warm water. Someone came to him and asked if the water was good, wasn't it? He agreed without paying attention and said that the temperature was so pleasant that it even made him sleepy. He was shocked when he saw Bernard, who said that he was glad to hear it. He asked in a surprised tone how long he had been here. He laughed and said that the maids brought him here, just like him. He was indignant at this answer and asked loudly, was he asking how long he had been sitting here? Could he even hear him? He ignored his question and said that butlers also like to take a hot bath. He asked how his mistress was. He said that he didn't have to worry about it. He calmed her down and went to rest. He is a strange man, sitting so calmly next to the one who tried to kill him. Isn't he scared? The protagonist calmly said that he was not scared, but he did not feel calm. Besides, they were taking a bath. Maybe they should put off their squabbles for later, otherwise it was somehow inappropriate to fight here. He started laughing at his words and said that he had said it well. He asked with a confused look, what was so funny about that? By the way, this girl was that very dragon in armor, right? He killed her. So why did she feel sympathy for him? He asked with a thoughtful look where he met her, in the Empire. However, it must have been in the kingdom, because dragons are very popular there. He looked away and said that they met in a place far from here. He can't say where exactly. He doesn't have parents, so he didn't receive a decent education. Bernard asked, does that mean he's an orphan? What does he know about dragons? He asked with a joyful look. Does he want to hear his knowledge about dragons? Dragons are mythical creatures with reptilian features. In legends, their purpose is to hinder heroes. They are also called the Scourge of the Heavens. He continued to tell his story, but he interrupted him and said that dragons have 7 lives. This allows them to avoid death and live a glorious and long life. These are not magical formulas, skills, or mysteries, but a personal racial trait that an ordinary person will never achieve. They live for their own pleasure, not paying attention to others or anything else. Then she met a mortal. He looked at him with a smirk and said, he refused her, declaring that he would never take her as a wife. MC, looking tired, said that, however, he did not want to get involved with someone who could start a war at any moment. Suddenly he stood up, called him, bowed, and said that he apologized for his earlier rude treatment. He dared to threaten, attacked him. Old age completely clouded his eyes. Therefore, he will accept any punishment. He was very worried about this and loudly asked him to raise his head. He said with a satisfied smile that he was so generous towards him. However, he had one request of him. He grabbed his hands and he screamed loudly in pain and loudly asked to let him go. He said loudly that he was grateful that he had forgiven him and allowed him to express his request. He asked to give the young lady another chance. He was not obliged to marry her, but asked at least to become her friend. He had served the lady for over 100 years and had never before seen her show even an ounce of interest in a living being. This was simply an incredible rarity. This means that the mistress is finally growing up, and he doesn't want everything to end like this before it even begins. He asked him to calm down with a confused look and said that it seemed like everything was serious. Bernard said that a name for a dragon is a concept of peace, in which the balance of all things is preserved. The name of the young mistress, however, is alien to other dragons. The desire to transform something into another state through the collection of love, a heart that tirelessly searches for something, a collector. The balance that the mistress controls. A collector dragon is a dragon that is closest to people and connected with them. However, with her current personality, most likely not. She may ultimately choose loneliness, which is unacceptable for her. She needs someone who will put her in her place, guide her on the right path, tell her how to behave, make her grow, and only he can do that. Naruhito asked, however, why can't he become such a figure for her? He said that he was only a servant and could not constantly contradict her. However, he was a human and he would be able to show her how important it was for her to have a connection with people. Besides, he was not the easiest person. He refused to fulfill his desires, declaring that all adversity and his path belonged to him. This is exactly the kind of man a mistress needs. He said with displeasure that his mistress was ready to arrange fights to the death for fun. Bernard was worried about this, agreed, and said that dragons were cruel by nature. However, he was confident that a kind young man like him could change her. Wait, his words were already akin to an excuse. He thought it was understandable. She was doing everything to dispel her boredom. She reminded him of himself in childhood. He turned away from him and said that it seemed rude to ask him for such a thing. The protagonist said that, to be honest, he did not do very well either. After all, he himself once killed her and almost killed her now. You could say that he was also to blame. He saw his reaction and loudly asked him not to cry. He said that he impressed him to the depths of his soul. He grabbed him by the shoulders, began to shake him hard and asked loudly, "He is not deceiving him, is he? He means that he will give the young mistress a chance?" He said in a worried tone that it was true, but maybe he should stop shaking him before running away at great speed. He said loudly that then he would leave them alone. He still had a chance to improve. Alice stood behind him and said that this old man was one of the strongest servants. He could easily disappear into the shadows and run away at super speed. For ordinary mortals, this is akin to suddenly disappearing. He said that he did not expect this kind of talent from him. He became worried when he realized what had happened and asked in a worried tone, "Who was there?" She blushed from embarrassment, warned that it was her and asked not to turn around. He said that you don't say things like that while getting into the bath with a guy. She said embarrassedly that she wasn't ashamed of her body, she just didn't want to show it to him. He said loudly that if she didn't want this, she should leave. She asked, so it turns out that he was still angry at her and hated her, right? He asked, was she really that armored tin can? She said loudly, indignantly, that she wasn't a tin can at all. She actually had a name. He was about to say something, but remembered that she hadn't introduced herself and tried to remember what she was called. He called her by name and heard her scream loudly. Alice became embarrassed because of this, and he asked, "What kind of squeak was that?" She said loudly that it wasn't a squeak at all. She continued telling something, but he called her name, and she made the same sound with a displeased look. She asked him to stop and asked what he was talking about with the old man. He said that it was mainly about her. He wants him to befriend a dragon collector. She was surprised by what she heard and asked loudly, what other friendship and with what dragon? Even though it doesn't concern her. She thought about it and asked loudly in surprise, is he talking about her? MC agreed and said that he seemed to have killed her, but she didn't seem to attach any importance to it. She calmly agreed and said that he was truly merciless, like a certain hunter from a fairy tale that was read at night. He said with a thoughtful look that he only couldn't understand one thing. She started showing feelings for him right after he killed her, but why? She said it was because she was overwhelmed by feelings. He was the first one to challenge her and fight her head on. Immediately after her resurrection, she felt immeasurable rage, interest, and excitement. These feelings made her happy. Why did he challenge her and continue to resist? These questions filled her head, and this gave birth to an overwhelming desire to know everything about him. These were her desires, but she was already completely confused. She wanted to get him all, not being afraid to use her power and influence. However, in the end, she was afraid that he might simply hate her. He thought that he was the same. If he had not met them, he could have become like her. Alice said that she knew. It sounded strange, like she was some kind of crazy. He thought that if they were in his place, they would have acted exactly the same. He said that this was not so. These feelings were normal. Wanting to be needed by someone, the desire to be surrounded by friends, there is nothing wrong with that. He extended his hand to her, introduced himself, and said that his hobbies were reading books, playing games, and relaxing in nature. He loves fishing, going to baths, and much more. He also loves cooking. He dreams of building a house by the lake. She was confused about this and asked what he was doing. He said that this was a normal greeting and he was not doing it because the old man made him. He wanted to. He was asking for forgiveness. He would not marry her, but he could be friends with her. His hand began to shake, and he thought that he should behave properly. Why was he even talking like some girl? She would laugh at him. She repeated his name with embarrassment and laughed. He thought that everything had not gone so badly and asked, what about her? What was her name? How should he address her? Who was she? He had never heard her name from her lips. How would they become friends if she had never even introduced herself? She said that her mother said that before mating games, the male requires the female to say her name, of course. Naruhito asked her to stop and said that this is how people get acquainted. It is not mating games at all. She can just call him by his name. But what is her name? She hesitated to shake his hand and said shyly, Alice Doral Flirtail. That's her real name. He said it was a nice name. From now on, they would be friends. She was surprised by what she heard and was about to say something, but he pulled his hand away and asked, so she doesn't want this? She denied it and said she was fine with it. She smiled shyly and said she was only glad. He asked, so, if they are friends, can I call her by her first name? Although he had never heard anyone address her that way. She yelped with embarrassment and said that it was better not to. It was terribly embarrassing. Only a limited circle of people could call her that. He thought that calling her Tin Can in Armor or Dragon Collector wasn't very nice either. He remembered someone calling him by his nickname and thought that he could try that then. He said that then he would call her Draco. Friends usually give each other nicknames. His friends always called him by different nicknames, so he thought of calling her that. She happily agreed and said that it sounded nice. He could call her that. She was happy with this, and he thought, did she seem happy? She happily wondered if she could get so close to him that thinking about this, she was all aglow. He looked at her with a confused look and said that she literally heated the water with her body. After some time, they were sitting in the hall and he, with a displeased expression on his face, said that it felt like he had been boiled like a lobster. Bernard, with a satisfied look, said that the lady had not been so feverish with happiness for a long time. Alice, embarrassed, said that she had behaved so immaturely. As an apology, they prepared him a delicious meal. They brought him dishes and he said that he could eat without embarrassment. After all, such a festive event had happened today. The protagonist tried it and was surprised to find it delicious. She said with a happy expression that headmaid Farron only prepared the most exquisite dishes. He said the meat was incredibly juicy and he wondered how she made that sauce. She quickly approached him, called him a dear friend, and said he had excellent taste. Few people in this mansion truly appreciated her cooking. She was very happy that he liked her dish. Special spices were used for the preparation, which could only be found in the capital. He asked if it was incredibly expensive. She agreed and said that by selling a couple of jars of such spices, the merchant was able to build himself a luxurious house. When she asked about the inflated prices and rarity, the merchant said that shipping by sea was to blame. Merchants have to fight monsters to save the cargo. He asked worriedly, was there really no other way to deliver the spices? He thought that they had a huge bath, a toilet, and delicious food. Something was wrong. Bernard called him a dear friend and asked if he couldn't help but notice his education. Still, where was he from? He said with a thoughtful look that he was born in another world and was summoned to this one. They do transfer people from another world here as a result of some ritual, right? Alice called his name, and he leaned towards her and said that they received a report from the guild where her dear friend was previously registered. Before becoming an adventurer, he received a strong blow to the head while being a slave. Baron called her dear friend with regret and said that he had to go through so much. He wondered, I wonder what he meant by summoning him from another world. He should be careful with his words, otherwise they would think he had gone crazy. She asked, more importantly, where does he want to go now? He said that he didn't know where he needed to go, but he was looking for someone. There was something in his things. Bernard brought it and asked, is this what he was talking about? MC looked at it and said that it was the necklace of return and the token that he took from Draco. He gave one to Lazar after he killed her. She laughed and said that he received it as a reward for killing her. But how did he get out of there? He said that it would be a rather strange story. After defeating her, he met a strange woman. Before he realized it, he had already been transported to the guild building. She also said that their meeting was a secret, and he didn't really remember anything else. She started wagging her tail with a joyful look, and said that the more important thing was that she met him in the tower, and they ended up becoming friends. So we need to find that lizard. He asked with a little surprise, is she talking about Lazar? Maybe he is somewhere in the city? Bernard approached her, wanted to say something, and she agreed and said that, to be honest, she was also looking for that lizard. Based on the prophecy, someone else will find him, so she stopped doing that. He asked, so he should find him? She agreed and said that she used all the resources, given her position as a dragon, but she still couldn't find him. He asked, maybe he was already dead and his body was hidden? She said that he shouldn't talk nonsense. Dragons will keep their promise no matter what. That lizard is undoubtedly somewhere outside this city. If he were dead, she would have found his body, but there were no reports of a find. That lizard had eluded her, but she wouldn't stop searching. He said it wouldn't be easy to find him. An additional quest had been received, chasing a lizard in an alley. The goal was to explore the location, the city of Agadal, the slums. He read it and said with a smile that it seemed they could handle it. He finished eating, thanked her for the food, and said it was delicious. He was grateful to them for the hearty meal and the warm bath. She asked if he was leaving already. Naruhito said she shouldn't be so sad. If he needed help, he would come see her again. She asked if that was really true. He said he wouldn't lie to his friends. She believed him, and he asked if he needed to change, and if she could give him his clothes back. She snapped her fingers and called the old man. After that, Farron brought his suit and said that the clothes belonged to the survivors of the second tier Lycan adventurer group. She bought these clothes from a merchant with whom she had discussed raising the tax. He looked at it with admiration, and Alice said that when she was trying to find him, she discovered these clothes. How did he like it? Bernard said that he admitted that these clothes were quite unusual. The people from the workshop begged him to give them this suit for research. She agreed and said that she would also share treasures with these dwarves. She snapped her fingers, called Farron, and she agreed to it. She very quickly began to run around him, put on the suit, and said that the preparations were complete. His clothes would stand out too much, so he should take this cloak with him. Alice said with a smile that she hoped he was pleased with her gift. He asked if she was joking now. He looked simply incredible. She said that she was glad that he liked it. He was going to call her by her nickname, but changed his mind and called her by her full name, knelt down and thanked her for it. He said with a small smile that he would never forget what she had done for him and would definitely repay her for her kindness. She blushed and said that it was even nice when gratitude was expressed so sincerely. However, no need. They were friends, so if he was in trouble, she would come at the first call and save him. He said with a smile that if Draco was in trouble, he would also help in any way he could. She said that when he decided on a destination, he should write her a letter so that she would know where to find him. The old man was to accompany him and report where he would stop. Bernard said that they should stop following him and give him freedom of action. He asked for forgiveness, and she asked with a joyful smile if he had already managed to fall in love with her. The protagonist laughed, called her a tin can, and asked her to shut up. The servant said he would see him out, and she would prepare the carriage. Alice stood up from her chair and said they should have Bernard escort him. Wait. Maybe we should give him some money for the journey? Will 50 platinum coins be enough? He turned to him and asked, roughly how much is that? He said that for that kind of money, one could build a mansion in the center of the capital. He was very surprised by what he heard, and she asked thoughtfully, is that too little? He replied in a surprised tone that it was too much. He thought he could find the money himself somehow. Suddenly, a small sign appeared above her head. The system notified her that the dragon had let its guard down and trusted him completely. She would give all 6 of her remaining lives for him. Main quest, Dragon Hunt. Objective, kill the Collector Dragon. Reward, main quest update, Kingdom Route Restoration. The Dragon Slayer skill evolves into Dragon Eater. She called his name with a slightly wary look while he looked at her with tension. He came closer, grabbed the sign above her head, threw it on the ground and asked, does it want him to obey it? He stomped on it with his foot and said, this damn arrow must die. The system notified that the main quest was abandoned. The quest line was interrupted. Sometime later, he was riding in a carriage with Bernard and said that he looked incredibly pleased. He said with a smile that for the first time in many years, he saw the lady so pleased. MC looked at him and remembered how Alice had asked earlier, still, are you sure he doesn't want to stay here for a little while longer? He refused and said that it was time for him to go. She was still worried about him and asked, is he sure that everything will be okay with him? He agreed and she asked, as soon as he takes care of all his affairs, they will meet again, right? He took her hand, called her Draco, and asked her to offer him her little finger. She did so and asked what it meant. They touched little fingers, and he said it was a promise. He didn't know how soon, but he would send her a message. What he could definitely tell her was that he had no intention of leaving the city at the moment. She said with embarrassment that he should also remember that he couldn't break a promise made to a dragon. He said that if he promised his friend something, he would definitely keep his word. He promised that they would meet again, not as a dragon and a mortal, or a tin can and a slave, but as friends. It was a pinky oath. She agreed with a joyful smile and said goodbye to him, for the time being. Bernard asked if he was sure that 50 coppers would be enough for him. He agreed with this, and said that as soon as he said that this money would be enough for him for 3 nights in a backwater hotel, her expression became simply hilarious. He could barely contain his laughter. He laughed and said that they were almost there. This is the adventurer's city of Agatal, the stronghold of the imperial capital. A fortress city erected by an unknown person in the early days of the 3rd civilization of the Great War, before the founding of the empire itself. Naruto looked at it and asked, the walls are very high, but how do they get water? He said that the city receives an influx of water from the Great Nata River. He continued to examine the city and asked, what kind of tower was this? He said with a small smile that it was an unknown wonder, the nature of which they could never unravel. The Tower of Hell. The Empire, or rather many generations of people, have been trying to comprehend the mysteries of this place. The Magic Academy claims that they will never see up there. The top of the tower is hidden in both the human world and the dragon world. Therefore, one cannot see up. His friend at least believed in it, but in his opinion, it was too naive. He asked what was at the top of the tower. Bernard said that the tales of the Church of Angels said that everything was at the top. Their world was created by angels and left this tower as a test for people. By conquering the top, one can get everything one desires, so it is written in the tales. He smirked and said that this was a very naive fairy tale. A system window appeared nearby, in which it was written that the main goal had been updated. The goal of the quest was to conquer the Tower of Hellel. He tsked in displeasure because of this, and when they arrived, the protagonist jumped off the carriage. He looked at him and told his dear friend that if he had any problems, he could contact the dragon embassies. Given his strength, there was no need to worry about him, but just in case, he would say a few things. The fortress city is a huge place and is home to many different people and races, so he needs to be on his guard. He said with a calm expression that he'll manage somehow. He must say hello to Draco, or rather the dragon collector. Bernard said that he would pray for angels and dragons to protect his path. He thanked him for driving him, and they said goodbye to each other. After that, he left and he went into the city. He looked around and said that it was like he was in a fantasy game. He walked further and found himself in a market where there were many merchants selling their goods. He smiled and said that it felt like after the tutorial he had ended up in the starting location. He boarded the fountain and said that he had a lot of things to do, but first he needed to find his friend. He ordered the arrow to find him, and the system announced that they were chasing a lizard in the slums. The goal of the mission was to find Lazar in the city of adventurers. It started moving, and he thought that it usually didn't let him down. If this thing wasn't destroyed, he would use this power to the fullest. A child crashed into him, quickly ran on, and asked for forgiveness. The system announced that a side mission had been received. The goal was to catch a pickpocket. He started looking for his wallet, and a man standing next to him said that he was very unlucky. Children from the slums beg from everyone here he should be more careful next time. He realized what had happened, turned around, and loudly said that it was his money. He ran after the arrow, pointing to the pickpocket, and loudly demanded that he stop and return the money. He chased him for a long time, and in a serious tone, loudly said that if he stopped now, he would save a couple of his teeth. He looked at him and wondered if he was really an adventurer. At the same time, another child in the city was looking at a bird, and Lazar, sitting next to him, said that it was quite noisy today. They should get back soon. They waved at him, and the older child thanked him and said goodbye. He also waved at them, came out of the ruins of the building, and thanked someone. This is where it all began. MC's first day in the open world. Continuing to follow his desires, starting his amazing adventure. He began to catch up with the pickpocket, and loudly said that he wouldn't leave him alone. However, he used the acro speed skill and escaped unexpectedly quickly for him. He climbed onto the roof of a neighboring building, apologized and said that, however, he also needed to eat something. He turned to him and asked loudly in a displeased tone, "Is he kidding me?" At the same time, a girl named Svi was sitting on a high wall and watching him from a very long distance. Before that, she remembered how earlier she had come to Kanosa's office, who, with a joyful expression on her face, had said that it was a lovely, charming platinum coin. It seemed so small, but how much happiness it could bring. However, how tired she was, squeezed like a lemon. She clutched her head and loudly said that the dragon collector had been killed and the wedding had not even taken place. Why was it necessary to choose this black-haired, fox-eyed Herod as a husband? However, the Dragon Council had paid her generously. Who was she to judge a woman for her choice? Let her play with him for a while and be done with it. A priestess approached her, called her over and asked if she was putting so much effort into fulfilling her mission. Maybe she should rest? She looked at her robe with a small smile and said that she was certainly a good girl. She had come up with a robe with slits for the ears. She was a little confused by this and asked if she was even listening to her. She agreed and said that the knights of the church, for whom the greatest honor is slaying a dragon, the Church of the Angel, which reveres only angels and no one else. The church is certainly strong, but their power is not absolute. It can lose everything at any moment. That is why she will do whatever it takes, fulfill any order. All this for her beloved and beautiful money. However, what does it mean to follow your desires? Why does she let him do whatever comes into his head? Svi stood nearby and thought that the bishop was especially noisy today. Kanosa turned sharply to her, called loudly and said that she must keep an eye on the dragon slayer, and if he gets into trouble, she must save him. You can consider this her gratitude for the money she received. At the moment, she sat on the wall and thought that what a difficult person she was. It seems he can deal with the pickpocket on his own. At the same time, Naruhito followed the arrow, and the pickpocket was caught by several bandits, who said that if he wanted to pass, he had to pay. They knew he had it. He loudly asked to be let go, but they hit him hard several times, pinned him to the ground, and said they would have to charge him extra for his disobedience. They took the stolen wallet from him and said that he seemed quite rich. Then they would take everything. As a precaution, they should break his bones. However, his face resembles a girl's. One of them began to undress him and said that he had already been refused by a girl in the city and he should understand. He loudly asked to be let go, but the bandit didn't listen, kicked him, and loudly ordered him to be quiet. They were very surprised when they heard very loud sounds. The bandit turned around and noticed that his comrade had been thrown into a bush. The remaining bandits were very surprised when they saw the protagonist walking towards them. He looked at the bandit with his wallet with a frightening grin and said that it was his money. He quickly ran up to it, threw it up, and loudly said that this money belonged to him. He went to the last bandit, who said in a frightened tone that the raven himself was standing behind them. He should think twice before attacking. He didn't have time to finish because he didn't listen and hit him on the head with his fist. After that, he grabbed him by the clothes and threw him with great force towards the other bandits. He looked at them with a smile and said that the mission was accomplished. He was a little worried because they weren't moving and asked if he had overdone it. They were breathing in there, weren't they? He was sure they would be okay. He took his wallet from them, and the pickpocket said that he should do it already. If he intended to punish him for theft, he should just do it quickly. I wish he had that kind of strength too. He was confused by this, and thought that now he felt somehow bad, since he thought that he would make fun of the weak. He came up to him, sat down next to him, and calmly asked how old he was at least. He said with a worried look that he was 11 years old. Is he going to break as many bones as he is old? He became even more confused because of this, and asked what was wrong with his head. He was not going to do that. By the way, "Who is he, a guy or a girl?" He said in a displeased tone that he was a guy and apologized for not having such menacing eyes as his. He decided to take it as a compliment and asked why did he steal his wallet. He knew that he would be punished for theft, so why go through with it? He became very angry and said loudly that it was better to be punished than to die of hunger. He would never understand how painful and scary it was. For their sake, he would do anything so that they had food. He will steal. Even if all his bones are broken, he will endure it. He started coughing, and he grabbed his head and said that he understood him. He thought with a displeased look about what to do with him. A girl with animal ears ran up to them, loudly called Luca, stood between them, and said that he could only try to touch him with even a finger again. A guy approached them, called Nico, and asked him to stop. She turned to him, called his name Reed, and he said that she should look around. He was not a resident of the slums. Most likely, he robbed him and this man started stalking him. Meanwhile, he got into trouble and they tried to take his money. After that, he came, beat everyone, got his money back, and thus saved him. MC was surprised by his deduction and thought that this is exactly how it happened. Suddenly, he knelt before him and said that judging by his clothes, he was an adventurer or a visitor. This idiot was his younger brother. As the eldest, he was to blame for his terrible behavior. She began to bow with a worried look and said that he must have saved Luca, but she started yelling at him. She asked for forgiveness, and he said that there was no need to bow to him. He was still kneeling and said that he did not know what he had said to him. However, stealing cannot be justified in any case. After all, they were his juniors, and he, as the eldest, would take the punishment upon himself. However, his brother, with a worried look, said loudly that he had done everything himself. It was he who should be held responsible for it. He turned to him, loudly demanded that he be silent, turned around and said that they were still small and stupid, so he asked that only he be punished. She looked at them with a confused look, while Luca loudly refused and said that it had nothing to do with them. Nico started crying and said loudly that they were back to their old ways. They continued to loudly argue with each other, and he stood to the side with a confused look and said that he hadn't even said a word. They weren't listening to him, so he asked, "Aren't they hungry by any chance?" He grabbed Reed's hand, lifted her from the ground, and said that they should listen carefully. They should take him to the nearest tavern. After some time, he ordered 3 kebabs of meat scraps for 5 coppers and said that they could eat. They stood in front of his table with shocked faces, looking at the food, and he said that they should sit down already. It was better to eat before it got cold. Reed was still in doubt and said that, however, his little brother stole money from him. He said in a calm tone that he knew about it himself. He considered breaking 2 or 3 of his bones as a precaution, but decided against it. Luca turned away from him and called him creepy, but his older brother got angry and called him by name. He turned to him, lowered his head, and said that he was sorry for robbing him. He said that he got his wallet back, so he didn't care. More importantly, what should you say to a person who treats them to food with his own money? They all thanked him, and Luca, looking a little worried, said that it had been a long time since they had eaten in a tavern for money. He looked at the group of men sitting nearby and asked if they were afraid to eat there because they could have their food and money taken from them. Nico agreed and said that they were still children, much weaker than any adult. He understood this and asked how long they had been here. He ate kebab and said that they have been here since birth. Reed patted him on the head and asked if he was looking for someone here. Naruhito asked with a grin why he thought so. He pointed at him and said that at first he noticed his clothes. They were of very good quality and different from the usual clothes that all the locals wore. Based on decent clothes, he could have turned to adventurers for help in catching the thief. But in the end, he went in pursuit into the slums himself. Even after catching Luca, it wouldn't be profitable for him to spend his money on them buying food. They could go to the city, which means he still has business in the slums. After feeding them, he probably expects them to share something with him in return. They are homeless, so asking them for money or things makes no sense. However, finding a person, considering that they live here and know everyone, is the most logical thing he could ask for in exchange for food. He laughed and said that he is smart. What is his name? Reed introduced himself and said that he was the eldest of the children, taking care of all the children in the slums. The protagonist said that it was thanks to him that all the orphans could survive here. Luca asked if that was too rude. He said in a displeased tone that it was not for him to teach him manners. He was scared because of his intonation, and he thought that it seemed like he hadn't said anything out of the ordinary. But he was reacting that way. He had wonderful intuition. He took out his wallet and said that he was right. He was looking for someone. He put a bag of money on the table and said that it was an advance. If they completed his task, they would get more. Nico called him over with a joyful look and said that this was a big task. The first time in a long time, they were given work. He asked doubtfully, was he absolutely sure? His younger brother stole money from him after all. He pointed at him and asked, he's in charge, right? He doesn't think he's brave enough to steal money from him. He pointed his finger at Luke and said in a frightening tone that if he did something like that again, not only he but all his loved ones would pay for it. Reed, with a slightly confused smile, said that as far as he could see, he was not one of those good-natured people who just throw money around. Then why would he get involved with people like them? He calmly said that when making deals, It is important to understand who you are working with, and that is the right thing to do. They see him as a duck who can lay them golden eggs. He sees them as ragamuffins, ready to do anything to make money. He needs to find a person, and they need easy money, and he is ready to pay them. So how much will they agree to? He loudly asked him to wait, and said, so that they set his price. He did not have time to finish because MC said that this was a wrong judgment. An important rule in trade is that it is the seller who sets their prices. They should value their work themselves, and not others should put their price tags on it. He thought about it with a serious expression and said that their price was 5 coppers, and there was no guarantee of finding the one he was looking for. He shook his hand with a smile, agreed, and said that he could consider the contract signed. He said with surprise that this was the first time he had set his own price for a job. Nico approached him and said, in a cheerful tone, that they would receive a whole 5 coppers. He said that he apologized for interrupting them, but they should get back to the essence of the order. They were to find a humanoid lizard. He asked, was he talking about lizardmen? He said that it didn't matter which one was correct. The main thing was that they understood him. Reed thought about it and said that about a month ago there was talk of a lizardman settling in their slums. He hadn't personally crossed paths with him. However, he is quite famous, so much so that a raven is looking for him. This caught Naruhito's attention, and he said that it was the name of a criminal guild. They mainly accept orders for robberies, murders, and kidnappings. He looked dissatisfied and wondered what he had gotten himself into if a criminal guild was looking for him. He said that adventurers and warriors of the Angelic Church were also looking for him. According to rumors, he helped a guy kill a dragon. He wondered if they were looking for him because of him. The guy who had met Lazar earlier approached them and said that he didn't expect to meet them. They turned to them and named Paulo and Shiro. Nico approached them and asked why he came here. He was surprised and said that she smelled of food. She said that if he wanted, she could share, but there was little left. Reed approached him and said that this wouldn't do. He should eat his portion. He ate, went up to the protagonist, bowed, and thanked him for the meat. He raised his head and said with a smile that he had managed to eavesdrop on their conversation. He must be looking for Mr. Lazar. He was surprised by what he heard, and the system notified that the additional goal of befriending the orphans from the slums had been achieved. The side quest had been updated, the orphan route had been chosen. The fate of the orphans would soon change. Paulo said that he could show them where he lived. He approached him, sat down opposite him, and asked, so, he knows where he finds it? Okay, they can show him the way. Reed bowed to him and apologized in a worried tone. He led them to a ruined building and said that they had arrived. Nico looked around and asked if he had been here before. He looked around and said that it was a house next to a sewer canal. He could easily hide from pursuit if necessary. That was smart. Luca, looking worried, said that they could go check if he was there. He stepped forward and said that there was no need. I think he was there. They completed their job, and that's where their paths diverged. They wanted to say something, but Reed agreed to it, took the money from him, and said that if he needed help, he could find him, and they would help. They started saying goodbye to him, and he agreed, waved his hand, and thought that there was no point in contacting them anymore. He entered the destroyed building, and the system notified that the task had been updated. Find traces of Lazar. He began to examine the room and thought that the coals were still warm, which meant the fire had gone out recently. He felt something strange and used magic around him. He found him hiding with a knife in his hand and asked how he dispelled his shadow. MC called his name and asked, isn't that him? They hadn't seen each other since the battle with Draco. He put the knife away with a surprised expression and said that this couldn't be. He grabbed him by the shoulders, started shaking him hard, and asked loudly, isn't that really him and still alive? He said loudly that he would not live long if he shook him like that. He and the old man had a habit of shaking him until he was dizzy. Lazar apologized and asked if he had a lot to tell him, but maybe they could talk in a different setting? He said he had just the perfect place in mind for such a thing. After some time, they came to the square, where he told him what happened, and he asked them to wait and asked if he took the dragon's life, met a strange elf with silver hair and a muscular old man. He had so many questions and few answers. He was going to ask about Draco, but Naruhito said that Alice gets embarrassed when a stranger calls her by name. He said in a confused tone that as soon as he escaped, he took the dragon's life and even made her his friend. He apologizes. It's just that common sense has clearly abandoned him. Even if his story sounds like a fairy tale, he believes it. He is glad to meet him again. Maybe he shouldn't have hidden so hard. He said with a smile that even Draco praised him for his ability to hide. By the way, he had been hiding for a whole month. Lazar was surprised by this and said that it felt like only a couple of days had passed. He had heard that time is distorted inside the Hellel Tower. This is due to the fact that travelers find objects and relics of past wars. This tower is a special place for this country. The protagonist said that there are a lot of treasures there. It's not for nothing that this city is called the City of Adventurers. He asked, after all, There's little common sense in this situation, right? He agreed and said that he would remind him that he is from another world in the first place. What common sense is there? He said that, to be honest, it's not that important. He's a good guy and the one who extended a helping hand to him. Everything else doesn't matter. That's why he shouldn't mess with him. He was confused by this and asked why he was suddenly saying such things. He said that it was because he was a dirty thief and a lizard man. He said in a calm tone that he didn't care at all. He sighed and asked if it was a boring story, but could he listen to it? Having received consent, he said that the country where he came from was called Shadowfang. Whether he knew it or not, the lizard men were a race that arose from the mistakes of the past. All of humanity despised them. They had no home, no one even wanted to hire them. However, in a country where a civil war was raging and the whole situation was unstable, he was useful. A gift or a curse, but he also possessed the power bestowed upon him by the villainous angel, Floria. She loved him, and he used his powers, taking on various terrible jobs, only confirming the stereotypes about his race, but he does not intend to justify himself, because this is the path he chose himself. He is just a dirty thief who made a living by causing others suffering. MC laughed at what he heard, apologized, and said he just felt like he was too honest to be a villain. By that logic, causing suffering to others is no different from a villain. He made money by ending lives to achieve what he wanted. Besides, monsters don't shy away from eating human flesh to survive. He walked over people for what he wanted and doesn't regret a thing. The only difference between them is regret, and it's what sets them apart. He's ready to lend a helping hand to anyone, to share his food. At the very last minute, he's not ready to betray another, even if his own life depends on it. Even if the whole world howls about how bad he is, he knows who he really is. Lazar was taken aback by his words and said he wanted to build his own house by the lake. That's what he dreamed of when they were both facing death. Naruhito said that, if you think about it, they were very lucky. Few people shared his desires, much less shared such secrets with him. He survived and now intends to fulfill this dream. He will continue to kill people, take jobs, save money, and build his house by the lake. They are both on the same side. He extended his hand and said that, as he promised, they should continue their dialogue. They should talk about their dreams, which they will definitely achieve together. Lazar could not bring himself to extend his hand in return and asked if someone like him was free to dream about anything. He agreed to this, and he said that the people to whom he caused so much suffering would never forgive him. He said with a smile that he, however, could forgive him. He covered his face with his hand and said that he would bring him nothing but misfortune. He chuckled and said that, in fact, he brought 3 times as many problems. He said that, besides this, a raven was haunting him. The protagonist asked if there was really something scary about him. We're not talking about them now. They're talking about dreams, not birds. He should listen. Is this raven scarier than the dragon? He was confused by this question, thought about it, started laughing, and said that indeed, he was right. After a skirmish with the dragon himself, the raven was like a child's bedtime story for him. He asked with a confused look why he started laughing. Lazar said with a smile that it was just his train of thought that was hilarious. He even felt like crying, but he was still glad that fate had brought them together. He shook his hand and said that it was true. He wanted to open his own store by the lake. Their desires were really similar, and he also wanted to achieve this. He agreed with a smile and said that as long as they were alive, they would strive for their dream. They would put all their efforts into this until they achieved it. They couldn't die. He said that despite his sins and the sins of his ancestors, he would fulfill this wish. MC, with a wide smile, said that he said it very well. We should drink to that. He took out a bottle and said that, in that case, the Angel Church makes a mead called Angel's Kiss. It marks the beginning of the fulfillment of their dream. How does he like that idea? They continued sitting, discussing something, but Nico came to them, covered in bruises and abrasions, and called him Big Brother. He called her by name, and she tried to say something about Reed and Luca. Lazar caught her, and asked her in a worried tone to be careful. He picked her up and asked, is this his friend? She has terrible wounds. They need to take her to a less crowded place and treat her wounds. He said that she and a couple of other guys helped him find him. She asked for help, and the system notified that the side quest had been updated. Wise choice. The goal of the quest is to decide the fate of the children. At the same time, several people in raven masks caught the 2 of them and asked, did the girl escape? Although it doesn't matter, now they have to tell where that lizard man and the man in the black robe are. A little later, they came to an alley, gave her the medicine, and Naruhito asked where the other children were. She said that Paulo and Shiro managed to escape, but Reed and Luca covered them. Lazar asked with a worried look, aren't these the children? They could be killed there. How will they deal with this? He was surprised by this and asked why he was even asking him about this. He said that he saved his life and was free to do with it as he pleased. He asked how dangerous these crows were. He said that they were connected to nobles and guilds throughout the empire. He thought with a serious expression. Simply put, he was a local crime boss. He thought about it for a few seconds and said that they would not go to save them. She understands the risk they were taking, right? They helped them and he paid for it. From now on, it's every man for himself. Nico understood him, thanked him, and said she apologized for interrupting. He asked why she had even approached him. She stood up, despite her wounds, and asked, "Isn't it obvious?" It was natural for a child who met a kind adult to want to ask for help, forgetting that she had been responsible for herself her entire life. However, she was glad they had met someone like him. She was grateful that he had treated them like people and was saying goodbye to him. She began to leave, and Lazar asked if he was absolutely sure. He was tense about what was happening and wondered why she had thanked him. He looked at her, and a system window appeared, stating that he had received a side quest, a wise choice, and the fate of other people's children. If he wanted to leave the slums safely, he should refuse to help the children. The raven would shift all its attention to them, and they would not be found. If he wanted to continue living a peaceful life in the city of adventurers, he should avoid any contact with the crows. They would spare no one who stood in their way. He thought with a serious expression that there was no point in helping them. They had met once, helped each other, and then gone their separate ways. The system notified him of a side quest, chasing a lizard in the slums. The next objective was to leave the slums. He recalled everything that had happened and thought that the wisest course of action would be to simply leave. He clutched his head at the thought of having to make this decision and, despite the system's warning, asked, "There was a point in saving them, right?" Lazar asked what he thought about it. He said with a smile that he thought that when they opened the bakery, they would need workers for the kitchen. He agreed with this, and the protagonist loudly called Nico, ran up to her, and asked in a serious tone if she could cook. She was very scared because of this and said that she could only fry a rat. He grabbed her by the shoulders and loudly said that she was hired. He congratulated her on this. Now she officially works for their bakery. However, at the moment they are critically short of staff. Also, to make up for the lack of labor, he wants her to introduce them to her friends. They should go and conduct an interview for them. After passing this, they will become their employees, and he, as an employer, will not allow anyone to harm his workers. She was very confused because she did not understand him at all, and he did not know how to explain it. Got angry, called Lazar and asked if maybe he would say something. Simply put, they will save her friends. She was surprised by this, very happy when she realized it, hugged him and thanked him. The system notified that the side quest chasing a lizard in the slums had changed the direction of development. Now he won't be able to leave the slums safely. A new chain of side quests has opened. MC was confused by this and said that it was actually his friend's initiative. He stood to the side and said that he didn't understand what he was talking about. He looked at him with a smirk and said that since he wanted to help them so much, he had to do everything to save them. He saw what a despot he was and how he bossed him around, right? Lazar approached him with a smile and said that he was ready to go with him anywhere and do whatever he asked. He said with a smile that then they should go. They had one unfinished business. The system notified that the goal was to save the children and deal with the crows. If the objective is completed, the route with the crows will disappear and they won't appear again in the main story. By the way, we need to hurry. At the same time, one of the bandits held Luca's hands while the others broke Reed's fingers, and their leader said that everything was wrong. The sounds that cute girls make when crunching bones are much more melodic than men's. What a shame they missed the girl with cat ears. She had such a gentle voice. He should just tell him what he wants. Unlike them, he doesn't have much free time. He knows that they, the children, know everything that happens in the slums. He's looking for the lizard man and the guy in the black robe. He will tell him where they are, right? He said with a determined smirk that he doesn't know at all. He walked up to him, stepped on his hand, and said that perhaps the girl had already run to the guy in the robe, asking for help. He grabbed him by the hair and said that although it was useless, no one would stand up for trash like them. The only ones who could stand up to the crows were the knights of the church. Does he know what muscles are? Maybe foie gras or Ronaldo standing in the museum? Trash doesn't even know that. It's because they aren't human. He was lucky to be born into a good family among humans. But the only entertainment for him was killing a maid or hugging a commoner until his bones crunched. An interesting fact: girls, crying in agony in the face of death, always call for their father. However, they themselves came running to his doorstep because their father beat them and bullied them. Reed called him a crazy freak in a disgruntled tone, and he sighed and said that it was no fun being with guys. After all, they didn't even cry. He plunged a knife into his side and said that was the end of it. If he didn't do something, he'd go to the next world. He might be just trash, but he still wanted to live, right? Luca ran up to his brother with a worried look, called his name, and he said they could come to an agreement. They would tell him where the guy in the robe and the lizard men were, and he would save his life. Reed begged him not to do it, but when the bandits started threatening him, Luca loudly declared that he would tell them everything. They must be in an abandoned mansion in the old district, next to a sewer canal. The bandit kicked him in the stomach and said he didn't like the answer. -5 points. He was very worried about this and said that he swears they took the man in the robe there and parted. Now he doesn't know where they are. The bandits said that although it's the old area near the sewers, they didn't look there. What will they do with these two? They will die anyway. He doesn't see the point in wasting time on them. He asked them with a worried look to wait and said that they had an agreement, after all. They promised to cure him, after all. The main bandit started laughing loudly and said that they should look at his naive face. He should trust people less. They will tell him anything. just to get what they want. They need to get to work. The others laughed, looking at them, and asked how much longer this tragedy will last. He should finally die. He feels that something interesting will happen. The bandit said that he bet 1 silver coin that the child will get angry and attack him. The others said he was betting 1 big silver coin that he would cry and do nothing. How boring they were. He bet 2 silver coins that he would fly into a rage. Luca turned to him with a displeased expression and loudly asked, "What's so funny?" Reed was dying. They started laughing even harder, and he asked, "Does anyone care?" This is one of the joys of his job, watching people like them die right before your eyes. However, he was already getting pretty tired of it. He tried to stop the bleeding and wondered why they were laughing, why they were having so much fun. He held his hand and wondered why this always happened to them. They just wanted to live. The bandits said it was time to end the show before it became completely boring. What else can you expect from children? Reed patted him on the head, asked him to stop, and said that the angels would not hear his prayers. The raven walked away from them and asked, "What can you expect from trash who, even on the verge of losing a loved one, can't fly into a rage?" Suddenly, a thick fog appeared in the square, and the children were enveloped in a shadow and transported somewhere. The bandit noticed this and loudly asked, "Where did that trash go?" Naruhito stood in the fog, smiling broadly, and said that the stage was set. He ordered the blade to cut them and began killing everyone around him, but only wounded one of the bandits. He fell to the ground, saw his silhouette in the fog, and MC came to him and asked, "Still alive?" How strong he was. He killed him with magic, came closer, and said that although everything worked out thanks to Lazar, he thought he was too used to using that thing. Still, one should be left alive, because he wanted to know how many people were involved. He approached the bandit, turned him over on his back, apologized, and said that he looked better than the others and was dressed more respectably. He found a letter on him, opened it, and asked what he had found. He didn't understand what was written. Maybe Lazar would understand what was written here? A raven approached him from behind, pointed a crossbow at him, and said that he should raise his hands. He raised his hands with a surprised expression, turned to him, and he asked with a smirk, what was wrong with his face? Did he really think he killed him? He asked. Did he put his double in his place? He demanded that he return the letter, and he immediately threw it at his feet. He picked it up, called him a good boy, and asked if he had managed to read anything. He calmly said that he couldn't read. The raven said that he had heard that he used to be a slave, so it wasn't even surprising. How should he deal with him? The protagonist looked at him intently and thought he was sure that he had dissected a guy with the same face as his. Then why was he alive? He asked if he really rose from the dead. He continued to point the crossbow at him and asked if he had killed a whole crowd of people. And then he was smart enough to ask how he escaped death. He should think for himself whether he would answer at least one of his questions. Now he had to tell him where the lizard was. The boss asked to bring him alive. This caught his attention, and he thought that he would like to know more about them. The raven called him strange and said that he was strong, healthy, but with air in his head. However, he seemed to have everything. So why stand up for some rabble and create unnecessary problems for himself? Does he even understand the risk he takes by crossing the path of the ravens? He calmly asked to enlighten him, and he asked if he wanted him to tell. Is it his hobby to play the hero? Is life not precious at all? Good, because of him he lost the entertainment of listening to charming screams. He will be obliged to compensate for that. He listened to him, chuckled, and said that this was, after all, his own adventure. It was pretty bad in an adventure, leaving behind the kids who helped him. He asked, what the hell was he even saying? He was about to call them trash, about to say something, but he smirked and asked, does he even understand value? A commander who abandoned his subordinates, turning them into cannon fodder. Unlike him, he couldn't afford to lose his workers. He envies such short-sighted idiots. He said in a displeased tone that anyone who dared to make such sarcastic remarks died very quickly. He provoked him and thought that he had a small crossbow in his hands. This crossbow works well at both long and close range. It is within the reach of the blade, but its ability to immortality is unnerving. Before shooting him, the raven said that if he died, he would have no problems. At the moment of the shot, he quickly ran towards him and the bolt pierced his hand. He quickly ran towards him, threw a knife and hit him. He was confused by what happened, and he ran close enough and punched him in the chin. He smirked, pulled the knife out of his body, and said that he would get it back. He was about to ask something in a surprised tone, but he said with a smirk that he had come up with an interesting thing and decided to try it on him. The result exceeded his expectations. He knocked him to the ground, took the bolt out of his hand, and asked who ordered them from him. He cut off his finger with a knife and said that for wrong answers and silence, he would cut off one finger. If he answered all his questions, he promised to give him freedom. Is he ready to try again? Who ordered them from him? He said loudly in a worried tone that he did not know this. No one knows the name of the boss. He plunged the knife into his palm and asked how many people were looking for them, and where are they all right now? He said in a worried tone that he alone took on this order. The whole organization was hunting for this lizard, but only he caught his trail and did not tell anyone where he was and who he was hanging out with. MC asked, he killed him, then why is he still alive? He called him a freak in a very displeased tone and said that he should think twice. He is the third son of the Bora family, Does he really want to make one of the most influential families in the empire his enemy? He stabbed him with a knife and repeated his question. It worked, and he said that this is his second chance skill. Before dying, he can create a clone of himself and transfer his consciousness into it. However, he has already used the ability, and if he kills him, he will die. What does he need? Money or power? He can recommend him to his boss and will get him as many children as he wants. He asked if he knows the names of these children. Does he know the names of those he tortured? He indignantly asked loudly. How could he know, and why does he need the names of these insects? Children from the slums can't even be considered people. There are whole crowds of them here, so he should remember them all forever. He did not attack him and asked. He was hunting a lizard. What does he know about it? He said loudly that he was nothing. He was an ordinary descendant of a damned race, and these dirty, smelly freaks. Why did he bother these insects? Naruhito said with a small smile that this was, after all, his own adventure, and he was continuing it no matter what. How could he continue this adventure and not help them? He was surprised by what he heard and asked, did he call it an adventure? Did he stand up for this trash for such a stupid reason? He said that Lazar was the name of the lizard man he was hunting. He bakes very tasty bread. The taller and older guy he almost killed was named Reed, and the little one with the pretty face was Luca. The girl with cat ears was called Nico. Paulo had curly hair, and Shiro was still too small, so he was carried on his back. He asked loudly in a puzzled tone why he was even telling him this. He said that in part he understood him perfectly. Whether they die or survive, he doesn't need to know their names. He agreed in a tense tone and said that it's pointless. They're so alike. However, he's not like that. He was accepted into the Crows. He, Wiseman Bora, a member of the Crows. He didn't have time to finish because he swung a knife and said that he was right. They were alike. That's why he doesn't care at all what his name is. He started to get very nervous and said loudly that he should let him go right now. The Crows would find him and kill him. He won't be able to live like this. He didn't have time to finish because he had to understand that now that he knows their names, he just can't let him go with this knowledge. He loudly asked them not to do this and said that he promised to give him freedom. However, he started laughing at this and asked him to keep the promises he made to idiots like him. He called him a monster with a frightened look, and he said goodbye to him and stabbed him in the neck, calling him trash. He took his knife, wiped it on his cloak, left, and said the search was complete. The system notified that the side quest was successfully completed. He successfully got rid of all witnesses and received information about the Crow faction. His actions are unknown to anyone, as he cleared all traces of his presence. However, the Crows will find him sooner or later. Recommendation: join any faction that can provide him with protection or earn status in the Adventurer's City as soon as possible. Sometime later, he came to a destroyed building, and Lazar asked if he was hurt. The protagonist approached him and asked where the children were. He entered the room and saw them both lying on a blanket with bandaged wounds. Nico turned to him with a worried look and called him Big Brother. He approached Reed, called him, and he stood next to him and said that he stopped the bleeding. However, he called his older brother, asked for forgiveness, and said that they caused him so much trouble. He said with a smile that he didn't have to worry, it was all over. He said that crows were still dangerous, and it was because of them that they were here now. He asked him not to waste his energy, and said that as soon as he recovered, he would. He didn't have time to finish because he said that he understood that he wouldn't pull through. In the end, he was able to become at least a little like him. How unfair. He remembered the past, took his hand, and thought that if he couldn't save him, then at least accompany him on his final journey. He said that he was here. He didn't need to be afraid of anything. The place where he would end up wouldn't harm him. There he would meet those he loved so much, and spend a calm and joyful eternity with them. Even if he left first, they would definitely meet again. Reed asked if he would meet him too. He promised to try to be there too, and thought that he was definitely not suited for such a bright place. It did not favor killers like him. He looked at him and said that he wanted to leave this damn city and become like him. MC said that he succeeded. He thanked his older brother and closed his eyes. He wished him a peaceful sleep, and the system notified that the conditions had been met. Talk about the afterlife with someone with higher intelligence, kill the dragon, and refuse marriage to the dragon. All conditions were met. He was surprised by this. Svi appeared on the couch next to him, calling him a dragon slayer. The system notified that a special event had occurred, the appearance of the head saint. He turned sharply to her and asked, "Who is she?" She asked with a calm expression. Does he wish to save this boy? He was wary because of this and wondered how long she had been here. He hadn't even noticed her appearance. He was afraid, looking at her, and wondered what kind of monster she was. She asked with a slightly upset look. Why was he staring at her like he saw a monster? He took a closer look and said that she was at the embassy then. She said with a smile that she was glad that he remembered her. She greeted him again, introduced herself, and said that she was the main saint in the Church of Angels. Lazar was very surprised by this and loudly asked, "Is she the secret weapon of the Church of Angels?" She said with displeasure that it was somehow rude to call a girl a weapon, but now, something else was more important. The boy was going to die very soon. Did he want to leave everything as it was? He was about to say something, but remembered the past and asked, "Wait, she cured Cran's burns then, right?" She agreed and said that the lady ordered her to do it. Otherwise she would have left him to die. He asked, "Does that mean she can help him?" She said in a calm tone that it was no problem at all. he asked. Then what does she want in return? She arrived suspiciously on time. He doesn't believe she has good intentions. She said that the mistress told him to keep an eye on him and help if he needs help. Nico wanted to say something to her older brother, and Naruhito, looking wary, said that she should slowly approach Lazar and hide behind him. Svi stood in the same place and asked why such caution. What had she done to deserve this? He asked, mice run away in fear from a snake. Isn't that obvious? She said it was a very interesting allegory, a good description of the danger from the mistress. However, she advised him to think quickly. The boy had very little time left. What will he do? Will he allow her to save him? He looked with a tense expression at Reed, who opened his eyes and quietly said that he wanted to live. He was surprised by what he heard and thought that if there was a chance to save someone's life, then the choice was obvious. He approached her, knelt down, asked her to save him, and said that he knew what she was capable of and was ready to pay any price if only she would pull him from the clutches of death. She asked if he could raise his head. He looked at her and she said that his eyes were as beautiful as the mistress's. His words were so pure. She could not ignore it. Moreover, the mistress asked to repay him for the debt, so she could not refuse. He began to get to his feet and said in a frightening tone that she was absolutely obliged to save his life. Otherwise, she could not even dream of mercy. She laughed calmly and said that she expected no less from the slayer of the dragon collector. Well, about the conditions. Knowing the lady, she would have asked for 50 platinum coins to be prepared for the winter, during a month without strong winds or snowfalls. Lazar was very surprised by what he heard and loudly said that this was unrealistic. She turned to him and asked if he would listen to his friend. He said with a serious expression that she must listen to him. He agreed, as long as she saved him. She created a parchment in front of her and said that she heard him. Funeral inventory, a church oath. The system notified that this oath cannot be broken. In case of failure to fulfill it or violation, a person risks becoming incapacitated. He was surprised by what he saw and asked if this artifact hadn't disappeared during the war. Svi told the lizard man with a smile and said that he apparently knew a lot. The funerary inventory and its benefits had not disappeared. They were simply securely hidden. He called him in a concerned tone, asked him not to do this, and asked if he even understood the risks. If he didn't fulfill the oath, his life would never be the same. He wanted to say something else, but the protagonist calmly asked, "Do I need to sign here? Would a bloody fingerprint serve as a signature?" She agreed, offered to take her knife, and said that this was also possible. He thanked her, left an imprint, asked Lazar for forgiveness, and said that he might regret it, but now it was important to save Reed. He thought it over and said so be it. He loudly called out to the Holy Lady and said that, however, he had heard that the church oath could be signed by 2 people. He took the knife, pierced his finger, and said loudly that among them, the lizardman, if a friend decided to buy a one-way ticket, then they would go with him to the end. He left his imprint and asked, "She doesn't mind, right?" He called him an idiot with a displeased expression, and he said that he heard that from an idiot. Svi asked with a smile, "A lizardman would be willing to go to the bottom for strangers? That's an amazing rarity." So, a dragon slayer and a native of the Shadowfang Kingdom signed a church oath. The chief holy maiden declares that this oath has become absolute in the name of angels. He said that it would be better for her not to talk, but to heal him quickly. She agreed and began to use healing magic, which immediately attracted their attention. Reed began to come to his senses, sat up, and asked if the pain had gone away. Nico was very happy about this, hugged him, and loudly called his name. Lazar approached him and asked if anything was bothering him. He denied it, and Svi said that he was lucky to be back in the world of the living. He should thank the dragon slayer. He called his older brother and was about to ask something, but he patted him on the head and said that everything was fine. She called the dragon slayer and said that because he showed her something beautiful, she healed her hand and this boy is very interesting. They both must remember the oath they made. When they get the money, they must take it to the headquarters of the Church of Angels. She disappeared from the building, and they were surprised by what happened. MC fell to the floor and asked what kind of monster it was. Lazar grabbed his head and said that she was one of the strongest in the Church of Angels. He met her in person for the first time. He heard that in terms of combat power, she is equal to an entire battalion of holy knights. He said with a worried look, "Draco, old man, now this too." He sighed and said with a grin that, however, he is just as much a threat, on par with them. The system notified that the side quest with the Slum Kids route was complete. Reward list. Lazar joined the group because he had completed the Slum Kids route 100%. None of them died, and now he can use them for his own purposes. He earned the Crow Killer achievement. He unlocked a new blade ability and the hidden quest chain, Fog and Sleep. After completing this quest chain, he will meet someone who will help him unlock the blade's hidden powers. After some time, Kanosa asked if everything was okay with Svi. She was very worried and thought that she wasn't stupid. She knew what this could lead to. She could handle it. Everything would be fine with her. She could handle it. She was a holy virgin after all. But she so rarely interacts with people more than she should. Maybe she was okay after all. She is confident that this child can help him, but if she says something wrong or uses force, then they will incur the wrath of the Dragon Lady. She just needs to wait for her report and not think about it. Absolutely not think about it. Svi came to her and told the Lady Bishop that she was back. She looked at her and said with a worried look that as she saw, she was finished with her business. She said with a satisfied expression that she did everything as she ordered. It seems the Dragon Slayer killed a couple of people from the Raven. She was surprised by what she heard and asked, "Did he get into a fight with the ravens? He just arrived in the city. It doesn't matter that much. He killed a couple of ravens. Nothing else happened, right?" She showed the scroll with a satisfied look and said that she made a church oath with the Dragon Slayer and his friend on their own blood. Kanosa was even more shocked by this, and she said with a satisfied smile that for his services, he promised to bring 50 platinum coins by winter. As she said, she didn't just help him, but made a deal with him. She slammed her hands on the table, was about to ask something, but she said that she did it because the Dragon Slayer reminded her of the bishop. His eyes reminded her of her past self, so she decided to make a fair deal with him. She asked her to wait, fell to the floor, and thought that the Church of Angels was awaiting collapse. Sometime later, the young girl killed several people in the hall of the mansion and said that she seemed to have made a bigger mess than she planned. Making a mess in someone else's house is bad form, so she needed to clean up right away. A man entered the hall and loudly asked what she was doing. She said with a satisfied look that as far as he could see, she was cleaning up. He loudly said that he was not talking about that. Does she even realize who she's dealing with? They're one of the 20 most noble families in the empire. She struggled to remember, and he said with displeasure that they were the Boar family. Who was she anyway, and why did she kill all his men? There were 50 of them. She asked if there were really that many of them. She did warn her, but stupid people are so rude and scary. He saw the coat of arms on her armor and asked with a worried tone if she was really a knight of the church. She happily agreed and said that, frankly speaking, she had come about the matter of his third son. His third son seemed to be a member of the enemies of the church, right? He said loudly, indignantly, that no matter what they did to his son, he wouldn't say a word, and besides, he didn't need to. She said, "What touching family loyalty." She didn't expect him to be capable of such feelings. He asked with a worried tone, "Their target is the Raven, right?" She waved her sword and said that destroying the enemies of the church is the job of a knight. He asked loudly in a worried tone, "Then why kill them? It's not in their interests." She asked in surprise. He still doesn't understand? She came to kill them all. It's as obvious as day. She raised a church of angels. This is justice, and anyone who strays from the righteous path is subject to death. Crows are evil. Those who support them and their vicious families, they are all subject to purge. He loudly asked her to wait, and asked if the church was seriously deciding to go against the nobility. He, a nobleman and a distant relative of his imperial majesty, even has rights to the throne. She asked with a puzzled look, did he say rights to the throne? He said that his eldest son had just married, the middle one was in the process of being engaged, and the youngest was only 9 years old. She calmly said that it was such a pity. He asked loudly if she even knew what was happening to the orphans in this city. He said with a sly grin that even though she was a knight, she was still a young girl, which meant he didn't have time to finish his thought because she pointed a sword at his face and said that, however, he shouldn't worry. She killed her eldest son, who liked to take girls apart. She killed her middle son, who loved to abuse the bodies of little girls. She also killed her youngest son, who enjoyed taking apart and putting back together the corpses of small animals like a mosaic. They were all already in the afterlife, and he would go after them all together under the wing of an angel. He was shocked by what he heard, and she killed him with one blow and said goodbye to him. With a joyful expression on her face, she loudly said that she had done a good deed, brought justice, and that today had not been lived in vain. She had an idea. With the help of justice, she could still find out everything about the crows. A girl came to her, called Stora, and said that it worked. She was finished, but it seemed she had overdone it a bit. She turned to her, joyfully called Clade, and asked if she had managed to meet those she was looking for. She sighed with displeasure and said that it would have been better if she had not. There are a lot of lost souls in the garden of this estate. They say the Boar family regularly killed the maids. She asked what they told her. She said that everything matched the information from the Archbishop. Wiseman Bora, the third son of the family, one of the ravens. The souls of the recently killed girls saw his tattoo. Storu said with a displeased look that there was nothing but filth around that they had to clean out. How disgusting. She agreed with this and asked what they would do with the Bora family. She was about to say something else, but she said that there was no one left there. They tried to escape, so she killed them all. Although, of course, she first checked through justice to see if they could really be considered evil. Cladea said in a confused tone that, however, there were children there. She did not understand what the problem was, and she said that she was asking for forgiveness for always having to do this for them. She did not understand this, and said that in any case, now only the third son remained in the name of the church's justice. They are the sword of the powerless, so they must diligently do their job. She agreed with a small smile and said that, how could it be otherwise, Her Knightly Majesty? Storu called her by name with a displeased look and asked if she imagined it, or was she making fun of her. She laughed and asked for forgiveness, but suddenly felt something. She turned around and said that the souls were rejoicing. She began to use magic and said that she should see it too. She used the pale spear skill on her, and they saw several spirits who said that Wiseman had died. They laughed joyfully and she looked at them and said that they helped them learn the truth about him, but now they were free. They said that he knew torment before death. Finally, he got what he deserved. The one who should thank the man with black hair for killing him should be the one. They disappeared, and Cleidea said that these souls were no longer burdened by anything on this earth. Their souls left this world, setting out on their new paths. She was happy for them. They had suffered enough. Storu said that meant there were others hunting the raven besides them. She called her name, and a knight ran up to them with a report, loudly announcing that the Order's secret police had confirmed a massacre in the slums. The bodies were collected, and several black feather tattoos were found on them. They asked if Wiseman Bora's body was among them. He confirmed it, and she said that they should continue sending spies to gather information about the surrounding area. Someone had dared to steal the church knight's loot, and they must find out who this insolent person was. She looked at her and asked if she wanted to get involved in this. She agreed and said that she had already decided everything. They are, after all, the swords of the Church of Angels. They have only one role. Those who manage to find them earlier are dangerous individuals. They cannot be left unpunished. If they manage to find them, they will need to be interrogated. If they serve justice, that's fine. They'll disperse peacefully. However, if they can't answer their questions, they won't be righteous. And if they turn out to be evil, well, they must continue their admirable mission. Cleidea said with a smile that she had said everything correctly. The church's precious sword, the first knight of Storupura. I wonder who it was? They know for sure that it was a man with black hair. After some time, Naruhito and the others came to the ruins and asked, "Are they seriously living here?" Nico said that Paulo and Shiro must not have returned yet. Luca called his brother and said that everything that happened to him was his fault. Reed put on his cap and asked with a smile, "It's all covered in blood and dust, but it's precious to him, right? They only do trouble for their elders, so they should repay them with kindness." He agreed to this and asked, "But why were they here?" He said it happened while he was sleeping. He began to recount to him what had happened, and remembered how earlier, when they were healed, he called him brother, and together with Nico, loudly thanked him. He was surprised by the way he called him, and he said that this was how he showed him respect. He would never forget how he saved them. She began to cry and said that when she heard that he would help them, she could finally breathe a sigh of relief. He was confused by this and said that she should not cry. He turned around and said that he should see how they behaved. Lazar, smiling, said that this was the result of his influence. He said that, in general, he wanted to hire them again. He said in a decisive tone that if they needed to work for him, they would agree to any job. They would not demand any money for it. He hit him on the head with his palm, called him a fool, and said that, as the great bald man said, work without pay is nonsense. His conditions, a full-time position, and for now, various odd jobs. Later, some special assignments, 5 working days, salary at the end of the month, and an advance, bonuses twice a year. Are they interested in this? Reed loudly agreed and said that such work is incredibly hard to find in the slums. The protagonist apologized and said that, however, he did not intend to stay here. He did not advise them to do the same. They should find a normal job and earn their living honestly. Nico began to cry very loudly, and he said that even he could not hold back his tears. If this was a dream before his death, then he was begging the angels for it not to end. He became very worried about this, turned around, and asked what it was. Lazar laughed and said what a terrible person he was for making the children cry. Luca woke up, asked them to be quiet, called out to him loudly, and asked if he was okay. They ran up to him and called out loudly. They ran up to him and he said loudly that since he woke up, they were ready to leave, right now. Reed finished his story and said with a smile that he knew the rest. At that moment, they heard Nico loudly call Paulo and Shiro. They ran out of the building, and she hugged them and said that she was so glad that they were safe. They weren't injured, were they? He laughed and said that everything was fine. He was glad that they were safe too. They hid and fell asleep. MC said that since they were all here, they should follow him. After that, they started looking for a hotel, but they were refused several times. At one of the hotels, a woman said, "Welcome. Are they with a bunch of dirty children? If they want, the stay will cost 10 bronze coins." They were confused. She got angry because of this and loudly asked if they would eat or not. They agreed, after which they went to wash up first and then to eat. The children fell asleep, and Lazar said that for them, there was no world outside the slums. They were very exhausted. However, they had no chance of getting out of there. But now they had a strange guy who would protect them. Naruhito said that they would still work hard for him. He said with a smile that this did not cancel his protection. He gave them work and a chance to see a new world. Worked a real miracle for them. He remembered how earlier he called Taro and said that they were going on an adventure with him. They would help everyone along the way. He asked with a small smile, "It's more fun this way, right?" Now they should discuss what they would do next. He took out a bottle of alcohol, agreed to discuss it, and asked, however, if he would drink with him first. He poured it into a glass, handed it to him, and said that he should not drink it all at once. He sniffed it, tried it, and said it was delicious. Lazarus asked with a smile, "It must be an angel's kiss, right?" It was a blessing from heaven itself. The church has kept the secret of how to turn simple mead into a drink of the gods, and the method for making this wine has been kept secret for 200 years. The protagonist asked, "Do they have such a poetic name for fermentation here?" He didn't know that, and he said that wine is made thanks to aged juice and yeast. He asked not to be ridiculous and said that the bread that rises and the wine from the grape are all a miracle of angelic hands. He asked, do they not know how wine and bread are made? He said that only the bishops of the angelic church or the saints know this, the so-called secret of angels. He said with a smile that it seemed like his angels were doing an excellent job. He looked at him and said that he had already thought that he was enlightened. He asked him to shut up and said that returning to the conversation about the future. Reed woke up, called him, and said that he asked to be allowed to join the conversation. He promised to sit quietly and not interrupt anyone. Lazar gave him a chair, grinningly called him a black-haired slave, and asked, after everything that happened in the slums, where will they go now? He sat next to him and said that they would follow him anywhere. He grinned and said that they would break through to the top. Having visited the slums, he realized, this city knows no mercy. The weak are robbed here and he is tired of it, so they will strive for the top. They will climb there, and no one will dare take anything from them. However, for this they need money. Besides, if they do not manage to collect the required amount by the deadline, they will be finished. He was worried about what he heard and said that they did this for people like them. He was about to say something else, but MC said that it was not a problem. If he had died there, he would not have been able to eat properly. He did it to fight back against this town to the fullest. Lazar looked at him with a smirk and said that if a child dies in front of him, he saves him. It is natural for an adult. He asked with a puzzled look. Isn't that what he said? He turned away and said that words were clearly not his strong suit. He cleared his throat and said that in any case, they are moving towards the goal. First, they will earn money. The fun part of earning money begins. What do they think a poor wanderer without a penny, status, and connections should do to rise in the adventurer's town? Lazar said that it would be impossible elsewhere. However, in Agadal, the adventurer's town, everything is much easier. They need to become an adventurer. The next morning, the two of them came to the square and he said, so, this is what the guild looks like. If the children work hard, they shouldn't fall behind either. He went inside, where many different people were talking about different things and doing different things. Naruhito was amazed by what he saw and said that it was time to work. He said with admiration that it all started with an elf, but here there are fantasy races for every taste, although they differ from his speculations. Lazar said that there are no pure-blooded elves left. There are only half-elves, although, in this city, you can find anyone. They walked further and came out into a hall where people were preparing food for a crowd of adventurers. He passed people discussing various things and thought that here there are crazy stories told in every corner. It's just like an amusement park. Even your eyes run wild, and you don't know where to go. The employees said that they are accepting applications for hunting. Please wait in line. He looked at this and said that it has already been sold out since morning. He stood nearby and said that at this time, hard-working adventurers and newcomers usually crowd around. Everyone dreams of snagging a lucrative order. The protagonist said he didn't think it was worth getting into the crush. He said that registration would take time. For now, they would just observe. A man passed by who bumped him with his shoulder and, in a displeased tone, loudly said that he shouldn't stand in his way. Lazar apologized, and he saw that he was a lizard man and called him disgusting. If he was a pickpocket, then he shouldn't even dream of it. He had nothing to steal. He spat on the floor next to him, and he, with a worried look, apologized again and said that he didn't mean to cause them inconvenience. He offered to leave, but he grabbed his shoulder and told the man that it wasn't he who bumped into him. It was his fault. As far as he can see, he can't see anything further than his stomach, right? The man was very angry about this, but he stood between them and said that his companion apologized for his rudeness. He didn't listen to him, punched him in the stomach, and said in a displeased tone that he should shut up. He had just insulted him, hadn't he? He ignored him, helped him up, and asked if he was okay. He agreed, and the man said that if they didn't want problems, they should get out of there. The adventurers nearby looked at them and said that Zil was bothering someone again. He was a lizard. After all, maybe they could take him as a slave for some extra money, but he shouldn't get carried away like last time. Otherwise, he wouldn't want to clean up the corpses. He felt sorry for the guy. He came from the wilderness, but here he was attacked once and his girlfriend was taken away. It was his own fault. That was the law among adventurers. Lazar said that they should leave. The noise was attracting unnecessary attention. MC stepped forward, apologized, and said he couldn't do that. Zil looked at him with a displeased expression and said he didn't understand him. He called him fat and asked if he was deaf too. He thought his drunken, stinking body had long since betrayed the monster in him. He was a piece of misproportioned meat, with a belly like a pregnant toad, skinny legs that couldn't run or fight. All he was good for was punching with his belly, like a sack. He said with a smirk that he could kill him. The man asked what he was muttering under his breath. Had he completely lost his mind? He said with a smirk that he was deaf, blind, and also brainless, and he had the whole package. He extended his hand to him and loudly said that he was going to kill him now. He easily dodged his grab and kicked him between the legs. He fell to the floor from the blow, and he said that more was not expected from a beer keg. He thought that he was a monkey with a talent for aggression. He stinks like carrion, and is also dull as an axe. The world will be cleaner without him. He put his foot on his head and asked Since he shouted that he would kill him, did that mean he was ready to part with his life too? Lazar ran up to him, grabbed him by the shoulder, and asked him to stop. Naruhito himself was a little surprised by this and thought, does he really now easily decide who lives? He smirked and said that it didn't really matter. What's the point of changing that? However, Vanferbana approached him from behind, aimed her bow, and said that it was time for him to stop. She advises him not to twitch, black-haired youth. He asked, who else is she? She said that today she is in charge of the dungeon. Something like an overseer for such hot-blooded idiots like them. She also really wished he wouldn't make her work more. He called his name again, asked him to calm down, and he raised his hands to show he had stopped. She continued aiming at him and said that a disgusting wind was blowing from him. Thick, bloody, but at the same time scorchingly warm. A strange, unnatural whirlwind, as if good and evil had mixed into a single seething mass. He asked in a calm tone if he reeked of blood. Should she blame him? Her own hands were probably not very clean. Lazar was about to call him by name, but she said he shouldn't move. A beloved child, enveloped in the wind of the villain Floria. Sadly, he frightened her no less. People around looked at her, called her a silver scythe, and said that he was seeing her in person for the first time. After all, she always spends time in the dungeon. By the way, did that guy have a fight with Zil? Wait, the black-haired one? Isn't he with the dragon collector? She lowered her bow and said it was getting noisy in here. Could he slowly turn towards her? He agreed, turned to her, and said her name in surprise. She said with a smile, as a former marksman from the hero group, the protagonist interrupted her, loudly called her by her full name, and said that so, she was here too. Suddenly, the system notified that a hidden quest had been activated, knowing her name. The quest conditions were fulfilled. Meet and preserve the memory of her name, and then meet the Tower Raider. The relationship with the Tower Raider deteriorated from friendliness to hostility. She very quickly grabbed his arm and pushed him to the floor, and the system notified that the quest objective was survive the encounter with the Tower Raider. She asked in a very serious tone, from whom did he learn this name? Lazar was worried about this and called out to him loudly, but she looked at him with a serious expression and said that he could only try to move. She pushed him aside with magic and said that she would ask again, from whom did he learn this name? He must answer immediately. A crowd of people gathered around, nervous about what had happened, and she forbade them in a serious tone to come closer. The people around lost consciousness, and Lazar couldn't move. MC loudly asked what she was even doing. She introduced herself to him, or had she lost her memory? She said that she didn't understand what he was talking about. He must answer now, otherwise she would kill his lizard friend. He asked, wasn't it she, the elf with the bow? Vanferbana said that, however, she was not an elf. She began to press even harder with her aura, and he loudly asked why she was so furious. She should calm down already. She said okay. She'll just kill him and find out everything from the wind. She wished him dead, but he got really angry and said that she herself would die now. He thought that he could use the blade at maximum power in minimal range, since Lazar was standing outside the range, so he could tear her to shreds. He stopped when he saw the system window, which said, a special condition has been met. Befriend the collector dragon to open a new route. Alice came into the hall and said, what people? They all turned to her, and Vanferbana said in a displeased tone, good or bad, but she always appears at the wrong time. She called Naruhito with a smile and said that as far as she could see, he was fine. However, looking at her, she became arrogant, called him an archer, and said that she already thought she could control herself. Without a hero, she can't distinguish good from evil. It's a pity to watch a servant who has lost her master succumb to delirium, she asked with a serious expression. Was she so determined to insult her? She stepped hard on his back and said that in those years when they traveled the world, she had only just hatched from an egg. How boldly to open his filthy mouth at her. She also became more serious and asked, did she dare to be insolent to her? A pathetic lackey? Although, as she saw, years do not make mortals reasonable and far-sighted, and she is an example of this. She must immediately remove her foot from his body. She asked, so this is who she is attached to, the man who took her life? She laughed with a satisfied expression, agreed, and asked if she was jealous. She denied it and said that she did not need a man who reeked of blood. She must look at him. He is rot in living form. The protagonist, with a displeased expression, said that this was actually offensive. Alice called his name and embarrassedly said that he should wait a little. She would definitely save him. She must let her friend go now. Vanferbana asked, between the dragon and the dragon slayer, there is only tenacious hatred. Is that not so? She said that it certainly did not concern her, although she did not have anyone left whom she could call her friends. She called her poor thing with a haughty smirk. She asked with a surprised expression what she was talking about. She said that she was associated only with the chosen ones. However, the magician dissolved into the walls of the tower, the thief disappeared into the darkness, and the holy sword fell. Now, among her deceased comrades, she would meet her end alone. She asked if she should tell her about this. An ugly creature, a dragon who desired human life. There is no place for her in this world. However, she is alone after this? Alice said with a smile that until recently she really had been like that, but now they are different. After all, she was able to find her killer, the husband who broke off their union so treacherously, the tyrant who decided to decide fate according to his whim, and her friend. With a serious expression on her face, she threw off her cloak, called her rabble, and said that this was her last warning. She had to let her friend go. She refused and said she wouldn't change her mind. MC finished using magic and said they had to stop ignoring him and making a scene in front of everyone. Blades had already surrounded her from all sides. She managed to jump aside, and he got to his feet and said she had pretty good reflexes. She asked if he wanted to kill everyone here. He denied it with a calm expression and said he would have had time to cancel the skill in time and save himself. Even a second would have been enough. She asked if he was crazy. He smirked and said what nonsense she had said. He had passed tests for mental disorders, so he was absolutely normal. Alice called his name with a displeased expression, and he called her Draco and said that she had survived in the end. She sighed with displeasure and said she refused to comment on it. He apologized for dragging her into this, and she said that only a dragon slayer was allowed to stand near her. Van Verbana looked at them with a very displeased expression on her face and said that they were annoying. Someone rolled around in the hall and shouted loudly. This attracted their attention, but she looked at them intently and wished a good day to the Margrave. Sapan, with a displeased expression on his face, said, "What a difficult day today." Alice, with a frightening look, said that as he saw she was busy, so he should leave here. She looked at them too and said that it was not safe here. Could he please leave for a moment? Naruhito looked at him and asked, "He is supposedly the manager of this territory, right?" He looked at him with a very worried expression and mentally said that he was asking him to stop them. This cannot continue. Hidamari came to them and said that she addressed them with the deepest respect. She looked at them with a serious expression and said, "Noble guardian of the great empire, dragon collector," also addressed to her, a venerable member of the hero's party. Van Verbana looked at her with a serious expression and asked, did she dare to interfere? She was worried while talking to them and said that, if her words offended them, she was ready to take responsibility for it. However, she was the guildmaster, and it was her duty to protect adventurers. Right now, they were in her territory, and she would not want them drag adventurers into their feuds. She bowed to them, and Alice yawned and said that although she was a dragon, she was also a tower rank adventurer. She also calmed down and said that the ban on duels within the guild walls was a special clause of the charter, added exclusively for holders of tower rank. The protagonist thought that they had all calmed down. Sapan looked at him with a displeased expression and thought that he had asked him to calm them down. He ignored it and asked if they should perhaps end their argument for today. She turned to him and asked if he was serious. She had tried to kill him, after all. He said that he was no better himself. He wanted to kill everyone here. Besides, sometimes it was cool for a dragon to do this old man a favor. He turned and said that if his words had offended her, he apologized. He would not repeat what he had said and promised not to say anything unnecessary. Van Verbana asked if he thought she would believe that. He said that this meant the valor of one of the group of heroes was incredible. She didn't even trust an ordinary person. She looked at Hidamari, started to leave, and said that she apologized for causing them all so much trouble. Sapan bowed to her, agreed with a worried tone, and said that it was very kind of her. She called her a hero and said that she was grateful to her for her discretion. She approached him and asked this black-haired man, what is his name? He introduced himself, and she passed by and said, "Welcome to the city of adventurers." She prays that their paths will not cross again. With this, she says goodbye to him. A newbie with a vile wind. She disappeared with the help of her magic and flew out of the hall, and Alice said that it was amazing. He silenced her with only words. He said with a smile that it was in no way comparable to her strength. Next to her, no one is scary. She called him a flatterer and said that she forgives him. He can continue to praise her. He asked, by the way, how did she end up here? She extended her hand to him with a smile and said with a smile that it was obvious because she was looking for him. Later, they came to the office where they were brought premium tea. She said with a wide smile that they can relax. They are not to blame for anything. Hidamari and the Margrave bowed, and he said they were grateful that she had shown mercy on the hero for them. She asked them to raise their heads and said that it was she who had caused them so much trouble and was asking for forgiveness for it. They were very surprised by this, and she sat down on a chair and said that she asked for forgiveness for the Margrave. It seemed he was not feeling well. Alice said that then, let him rest. She called MC and asked how long he would stand there. With a joyful expression on her face, she pointed to the place next to her and said that he could sit. She allowed it. Only he could sit next to her. She allowed the lizard to sit next to him, but only on a stool. Lazar told the great dragon that it was an honor for him to sit next to her. He leaned toward him and said in a serious tone that he had better not refuse and sit next to this nice lady. He nevertheless agreed, sat down on the sofa, and she said that she would get straight to the point. The three of them want to form a group. Hidamari was surprised by what she heard and asked who would be in this group. She pointed to the three of them, including herself, and he, with a displeased look, thought that he had never agreed to this at all. She handed her the document and told the great dragon that she was very sorry, but the guild has strict rules for forming a group. She asked, "What the hell is that?" She said that she held a tower rank, the highest rank recognized by both the empire and the guild. For security reasons and to prevent abuse, group members can differ in rank by no more than one step. That is, she cannot be in the same group with these gentlemen. That is against the rules. She was very surprised by what she heard, and he said that he reminded him that they hadn't even had time to register. She was even more surprised by this and asked, "Are you serious?" She called her over and asked what rank new adventurers are awarded. She said that newcomers are usually awarded rank 4. He said it was surprising that she cared about these rules. Alice said that guild rules are a promise between the guild and the adventurers. They, a proud race of dragons, are used to keeping their promises. Couldn't they at least give him rank 1? Hidamari said that even after going through numerous procedures and filling out paperwork, they can only award a newcomer rank 3 at most. There are many adventurers who remain rank 4 for the rest of their lives. To obtain such a high rank, you need to bring merit to the guild, receive permission from the guildmaster, and be approved by the legal chamber and the council. She was surprised by this and said that she didn't even know anything below rank 2 existed. Actually, he killed a dragon. That's a great achievement. She said it was a truly great achievement, but that achievement alone wasn't enough to promote him to rank 1. She was very unhappy about it and said, "I wish he would get rank 1 soon. She wants to be in the same group with him." Naruhito said with a small smile that it was very sweet of her. She was very embarrassed about it, and he said that she didn't need to worry. They would quickly catch up with her. They would still work very hard for the gold. By the way, the higher the rank, the more expensive the orders would be. Hidamari agreed and said that the difficulty would also be appropriate. He thought about it, turned around and asked how she even knew that he intended to become an adventurer. Alice abruptly turned away from him and said that she didn't want to talk. She blushed from worry and said that it was as if she had been following him, so she would refrain from answering. He asked, "So she had been following him?" Her silence was the answer, and everyone around her would confirm it. She said loudly that he hadn't mentioned his destination in the letter, which was why she was worried. He said they hadn't said goodbye long ago. She said loudly, embarrassed, that she had arrived in the city, bought a house here, and then, wait, let him forget about it. Hidamari watched them from the side and wondered if this was really the great dragon collector. Now she looked more like an ordinary girl. If the Margraves saw this, he wouldn't believe his eyes. Naruhito said that in general he would try to raise his rank faster. She said indignantly that he was obliged to do it as soon as possible. She sniffed him, and he looked confused and asked why she was sniffing him. He had showered and washed his clothes recently. Did he really still stink? She gritted her teeth in anger and said that it was the stench of angels. He started sniffing his clothes with a puzzled expression, and she asked, "So he met with church representatives?" He remembered this and said that he had recently met a girl with a scroll. A lot had happened and they needed the little saint's help. They had made a sacred blood oath with her, and that was all. She was furious at what she heard, laughed loudly and asked, she allowed him to live as he wanted, but dance to the tune of angels, those gold-hungry hens, the Holy Virgin, the knights of the church, the bishop. Who did they think they were, offering an oath to her killer? What was the condition of the oath? He said the life of one guy in exchange for him bringing 50 platinum coins to the church by winter. She asked with a serious expression, "He can earn it himself, right?" He said with a smile that, like her, he does not break promises. She suddenly became kinder and said that this was good. He should prove his words with action. He would have to crush these feathered creatures to smithereens. He snapped his fingers and called Farron. She immediately emerged from the portal and said that she had already sent her familiar to the Church of Angels. Alice said that she would have to report everything that was happening there. She agreed and said that, apparently, the bishop was right now foaming at the mouth, performing a strange dance and shouting something. She said with an evil smile that it looked like she would have to remind him who she had crossed. The protagonist, called Draco, extended his hand to her and said that he was grateful that she stood up for him. She was confused by this and asked what was wrong with him. He asked if he could shake her hand, right? She agreed with a smile, shook his hand, and he said with surprise that she was squeezing too hard. She laughed with a happy expression and said that she would go. She still had a lot of things to do. He must work hard as an adventurer. He said goodbye, and she called Hidamari and said that she should keep an eye on these idiots and tell the Margrave that they would see each other again soon. She said goodbye to her, and the two of them left through the portal. She said with a slightly confused look that it might be too late, but welcome to the Adventurers Guild. A little later, they received their adventurer cards, and the worker with a friendly smile said that she congratulated them on registering with the Adventurers Guild. Now she will briefly explain the work system. They have reached rank 4. The first type of work, they take a commission, after which they contact the client, who gives them a special token. Returning to the guild, they exchange this token for money at the reception desk. The second is quite simple. They can take hunting commissions and bring various ingredients to the guild. Skins, meat, organs. The payment will be proportionate to the price of the ingredients. If they want to go hunting, the guild can lend them weapons for a while. They must go to that room to get weapons. MC went to the right room, approached the worker, said hello, and said that they were told they could get weapons here. He pointed towards the weapon racks and said that they could choose whatever they liked. He came up, started looking around, picked up a mace, and started swinging it, showing it to Lazar. He looked at it and asked why he didn't take a sword. He looked at the weapon in his hand and asked why he needed to go through all this trouble. It was enough to just hit something with it. He warned the worker that he would take it, and they went to the exit, saying that it could be hidden perfectly. They went outside, people started looking at them, and he said that he had come up with something. But first, they needed to cover themselves to attract less attention. First, they would hunt and establish connections with merchants. It depends on the guild for the supply of monster materials, right? Adventurers also obtain these materials. He walked alongside and asked, so they would take it into circulation? Naruhito said that any merchant benefits from having a reliable adventurer who consistently supplies the necessary materials. Personal connections with merchants will come in handy when they open their bakery. Although, first, they need to show results. He agreed with this and said that they should first choose a target for the hunt. He already had an idea prepared. He took out a notebook, handed it to him, and asked him to read it. It listed recommended targets for beginners, and he said he didn't expect the guild to provide such information for free. Lazar, with a thoughtful expression on his face, said that, judging by the dusty stacks, no one took these booklets. He smiled and said that apparently, among adventurers there are plenty of idiots who don't know how to manage information. He asked, so what will they hunt? He pointed to a monster called a Titan worm, and said that this one looked like it. He was surprised by what he saw and asked, is he serious now? He said that his skill is especially good against such creatures. He decided to trust him. They looked ahead, and he said that this is the Eastern Gate. If they apply there, they will gain access to the plains for hunting. He looked at the huge wall, and he said that rumor had it that it was built to keep dragons out. As they approached, a guard loudly ordered them to stop and said that passage was only for licensed adventurers. Townspeople and travelers passed through the Western Gate. The protagonist showed his badge and said that they were adventurers. He saw that the badge was bronze, skid, and asked, do you have a hunting permit? Lazar handed over the document, and he noticed that he was a lizard man. He asked with a smirk, does the guild really accept such people now? How low have they fallen? He reacted calmly to this, and said that he was grateful for the Empire's generosity. The guard said that he could only try to do something against their country, but he would quickly cut off his fingers. He didn't like how they treated his friend, and thought that he was trying to behave with dignity. He should also restrain himself. He said that they have everything they need. He should let them pass already. The guard asked with a displeased tone, what did he say there? He should show some respect. He turned to him and said that this was a patrol of the Angelic Church. If they crossed their path, they would put them in prison. He was dissatisfied with this, and the guard extended his hand to them and said that the last thing, they must pay a fee and a commission. Didn't they explain this to them in the guild? He said with a displeased expression that he was hearing about this for the first time. With a wide smile, he called the rest of the guards and said that apparently the educators from the guild forgot to explain to them about taxes. They must pay or leave here. The guards surrounded them and asked if they were 4th rank and were without a group. They wouldn't be able to pass without a tax. He thought with a smirk that such blatant extortion was even funny. The guard said that they must pay a silver coin for both of them to pass. If they don't have money, they can go to jail for interfering with church affairs. Frankly, they don't care what they choose. MC apologized for wasting their time and asked them to wait a bit. The guard said he was smart. He should have paid right away and wouldn't have had to scold them. Girls, of course, can be paid in other ways, but for the lizard and the guy, paying is the only option. He immediately remembers the girl from the village. It seems he hasn't seen her for a week. There was no need to take advantage of her so diligently. Her face didn't show that she was against it. She wasn't from the village, but from a rich family. But who cares? It seems she settled somewhere in the slums. She's too stupid to go to the pleasure quarter. They were unhappy with this, and he asked, before he pays them, if he could clarify one thing. How does their church feel about dragons? They were surprised by this question, and one of them said that he must pay immediately or go to jail. A system window appeared in front of him, which said, hint, he must use the following words in his speech. Guildmaster, Church of Angels, Dragon Embassy, Guild Reform, Dragon Slayer Mark, Tower Rank. Goal, convince or intimidate the church patrol. He said with a sly grin that he was just clarifying out of curiosity. The Guildmaster grumbled that at the Eastern Gate, someone was posing as a close friend of the dragon without the knowledge of the guild and the church. The guard was surprised by this and asked, so it was him then? He asked, was he really exposed? They should wait a little, he will get the deposit for them. He took a token from his bag, apologized and said that it seemed wrong. A coin, but not for payment. His friend gave it to him. If he pays, and she finds out, she will be very angry. Then he will have to tell who exactly demanded money from him. They were surprised by what they saw and asked, a golden token? Isn't that a tower rank? So it's related to the dragon? One of them approached him, snatched the token, and loudly said that it was a fake, and that he had to give it to him. He was about to say something, but suddenly lost consciousness. The other guards were surprised by this, and said that it was real. They say that if someone below a tower rank touches this token, disaster will befall them. Could he really be that guy? The church report said that the slave adventurer who killed the dragon collector was a black-haired guy in the company of a lizard. They ordered him to remove his hood, and Naruhito did so with a calm expression. They were convinced that it was true, and he said that now they should listen carefully. Do they want to make the guild and the dragon enemies of the church? He took his badge and said that the Adventurers Guild is currently purging its ranks and identifying those involved in bribery and corruption. It's clever, isn't it? However, these freaks won't give themselves away so easily. They say they found a newcomer for the investigation, someone the dragon recognized. However, someone who is still young enough to be pressured. But this newcomer is not very reliable. He doesn't like unnecessary problems. It seems he could do something like this. Report that this is all nonsense and that he doesn't take money from anyone, and the people in the church are all law-abiding and good people. So, how much do they have to pay for passage? They allowed them through, politely wished them luck on the hunt, but the system notified that the passage was open to them. But the attitude towards the guards changed to hostility. Now they see him as a threat and may try to silence him and get to those dear to him. The two of them walked on, and Lazar asked if he was absolutely sure. He agreed and said that although he didn't like their looks, he should take 10 deep breaths, and he would take the necessary measures. He agreed to this, and he used the blade skill on all the guards and killed them. The protagonist said that now he could go without unnecessary fear. The system notified that 6 church guards had been eliminated using the remote activation of the blade. Relations with the guards were reset to 0. No one remained who remembered him. Since there were no witnesses, he would not be charged with their deaths. He said that those freaks got what they deserved, and that was good. They went outside, and he was surprised by what he saw. He looked at him and asked, "What's wrong with him?" He said that he was simply amazed, so to speak. It was so spacious here. He said that roads had already been laid from here, leading to different ends of the empire. They went further, and he said, only the road has not been properly finished. Lazar said that these places were dangerous. They probably haven't gotten around to it yet. He stopped, looked at the field, and with a calm expression said that it was so nice here. However, they should return to the goal. He agreed and asked if they could hunt a horned rabbit first. The skin, meat, and horns are used as medicine. He said that it would be good for a warm-up. Their main target is that huge snake. He said it was a titan snake. Even first-rank adventurers have trouble with it. Besides, finding it won't be that easy. It usually sleeps in burrows underground. MC said that's exactly why they hunt them. They just need to find the snake's lair. He took out his weapon and said that the fog blade will do the job. He thought it over and said that with his fog, it was quite possible. He said that although to pull off such a thing, a lot of conditions would have to be met. With frequent use, the body hurts a lot, so he would like to deal with it with one blow. However, how to approach this unnoticed? Lazar used his skill and before disappearing said that he could help with this. He was very surprised by what happened, started looking for him, and he appeared behind him and said that he was here. He was very surprised by what happened and loudly asked how he did it. He said that he should not forget that he is the favorite of the sinner Floria. This skill that she granted allows one to hide in the shadows. He remembered the past and said, so that's how he got Luke and the others out of trouble back then. He said that he can hide up to 2 adult specimens in the shadows. He never thought that this skill would one day help him save someone's life. They heard a very loud scream and immediately ran in the right direction. They peered out from behind the bushes, saw a huge monster, and he asked, was that what it was howling like? He wondered if it was scared of something. The monster was grabbed by a huge snake, and Lazar said they met it even faster than he thought. It turned out to be a titan snake, and the system notified that a side quest had been received, a black snake. The goal of destroying this first-rank monster. Naruhito said with a smile that this would save them time, but they would have to interrupt his lunch. He agreed, began to use the skill, and said, great servant of Sin Floria, he asks that you send him your cover and cover him and his sins with your shadow. He looked at this in surprise, and he said with a smile that he didn't need to hold back. He would cover him. The titan snake finished eating the monster and noticed the two of them sitting next to each other. He looked at it with a smile, used the mist blade, and said that it was time to work. At the same time, Bernard pointed towards the passage and said that they were waiting for them. The Bishop of the Church of Angels, Lady Canossa Thielfjord, and Lady Holy Virgin Svi Dakmashar. She thanked him with a very frightened expression on her face and thought that it seemed like she would soon die. This is the Dragon Embassy, and it was, of course, the Dragon Collector who invited them. Alice looked at them with a smile and said to the Bishop, well, welcome. She tried to stay calm and thought that she was incredibly flattered by her invitation. She was still nervous and thought that the reason was clear. They had incurred the dragon's wrath, and the only thing she could do now was beg for mercy with all her soul and body. She didn't want to die. She wanted to say something, but she interrupted her and said that she remembered a story. The story of the lonely storm angel, passed down among dragons, was always filled with greed, obsession, and destruction. Greedy angels, thirsting only for what belongs to others, that's how they've always been. The desire to emulate one's idol, that's the power of faith, isn't it? Does the Holy Maiden have something to say? Svi calmly denied it, and Canossa became very worried and called the Great Dragon Collector. In a frightened tone, She said that they had come to her today to repent for their actions and apologize for the unfortunate misunderstanding that led to their contract with her pet. Alice was very angry because it seemed she had misunderstood something. He wasn't her pet and lived as he wished. He acts to fulfill the desires raging within his fragile, fate-ordained body. He's not just a pretty thing in her collection. He's worthy of standing next to her, that's her decision. This made her even more worried, and she wondered how wrong she had been. Did the dragon itself really care about humans? She said in a serious tone that living freely according to one's inner desires was her friend's image. She would not allow anyone but herself to touch his path. Even she restrained herself. However, they, the children of angels, had placed shackles on him, an impure collar on the dragon's friend. Do they want to anger her? They brought her a sword, which she took, and said that she should not make such a frightened face. This incident greatly spoiled her mood, but she was not going to destroy the entire church of angels. She pointed the blade of the sword at them and said that the Holy Virgin was the one who had bound her friend with unholy shackles. She must cut off her head, and then, be that as it may, she would change her anger to mercy. Canossa began to cry and thought that, as she had suspected, dragons loved to force people to choose, no matter how cruel that choice might be. Svi stood before her, and with a serious expression, asked how she dared to make the bishop cry. Alice, with a serious expression, asked who gave her the right to open her mouth. Bernard ran up to her and knocked her to the ground, and she asked in a displeased tone who she thought she was, or maybe she was just desperately stupid. He asked if the saint really imagined that her word could be equal to the dragon's own. What would she command? She said that although she was superior to the common rabble, that was all. That was not enough to stand on her par. Therefore, she would pay for her insolence with her life. She threw the sword towards her, and Svi called the bishop and said that, as the dragon had said, she asked that her word be followed. Canossa hesitantly picked up the sword and wondered what she should do. What choice was there even? She called her mistress, asked for forgiveness, and said that it seemed she would not be able to fulfill her dream with her. She began to remember the time spent with her and thought that she was her precious friend. She stood up and said that this was a test. The great priestess, connecting the world of people and dragons. What attracted their attention? This is the test of the dragon slayer. Alice looked at her with a displeased expression and asked, what kind of nonsense is this? She should not experience this and measure it. Do they, worms, have the right to touch what gives her pleasure? She spread her arms to the side and said loudly. She understood everything correctly. She begs for forgiveness. She asks to allow them to beg for mercy. In their foolishness, they committed this offense because of their love for her, because of their weak, foolish, ignorant human love for her, the great dragon. She calmed down a little and allowed her to continue. She said that just as she was interested in that creature, they too turned their hearts to her. She thought that was why she was asking not to be forced to cut a friend's head. She said loudly that beyond the human lands there was a pillar of peace, a great life, surpassing even transcendental beings. They thirsted for her. They, weak humans, were enchanted by her. She listened to her carefully and thought that she sensed no lie in her words. Canossa said it was jealousy. They were envious of the dragon slayer who had managed to capture her attention. Her gaze and voice, now directed not at the Empire, but at him. That was why they had committed this foolishness, in the hope that if they approached her killer, her gaze would fall on them too. That was enough for them. She's so merciful that she granted forgiveness at the price of the Holy Virgin's head. Wait, that's not enough. She's begging to be burned along with her. Svi was surprised by this and called her mistress, but she, with a very tense expression, thought that for the sake of the holy angels, she should simply remain silent. She said that if they could attract her attention even for a moment, even if it meant their destructive wrath, then it was worth it. Alice, with a displeased expression, asked, so all this was just to get her attention, even knowing that it would anger her? Canossa knelt before her and said that it was truly foolish. However, even her wrath was a priceless gift for them. She said that then she would fulfill her wish and put an end to this. Svi, looking worried, called out to the bishop, who quietly asked her to be quiet. She took a deep breath and said that the dragon slayer wasn't all that great either. These words angered her greatly, and she said that 50 platinum coins. Indeed, for an ordinary person, this is a sum that would be impossible to earn in a lifetime. However, the dragon slayer, being human, never transcended humanity. He remained a man who slew dragons, a rebellious creature, and yet he made such an unfair deal by human standards. She stood up, called out to her, and said that she must tell them why she decided to make a deal with this man. She said that because he was noble, his gaze fixed on the end of a human life, living it out in peace, was similar to her, the bishop, so she helped him. She took an oath so that there would be no debts left. She was about to say something else, but Canossa interrupted him and said that this deed was an act of love. The angel church recognizes the power of the dragon slayer. They want to see what his path will be. His appearance and existence, they accept it. It is a great honor, precisely because the dragon does not believe in his powers. It is precisely because the dragon protects him that they manage to attract her attention. If they are destined to fall from this, they will be grateful. She can dispose of this life as she wishes. Let the man who lives under her protection, the dragon slayer, be illuminated by radiance. Alice thought about this, called Bernard and asked what he thought about it. He apologized and said that, with your permission, it was a complete defeat. Executing them now would only confirm that her words were true. She asked if he meant that he was under her protection. He agreed and said that he also meant that she believed in the powers of her friend. Moreover, they will go down in history as those who managed to attract the dragon's attention and fell for the love of her. She thought about it and said she had changed her mind. The way they will atone for their offense against her killer will be other than at the cost of their lives. Canossa restrained her joy and agreed to this, and she said with a smile that there is, however, one condition. From now on, any unrest he causes in this city and country will be her concern. She did not quite understand her, and she said that he is a foreign entity. He creates ripples on the surface of the lake, destroys the established order. At the same time, he moves forward what is frozen. She has thought a lot, but he does not like it when she interferes too much. However, she wants to help. Therefore, the Church of Angels, from now on, they will patronize this adventurer. It is not necessary to do this openly. As long as the deal binds them, they must observe it. This time, she would turn a blind eye to their insolence. Canossa said with a smile that her words were immensely merciful. In fact, she was incredibly happy about this and thought it was a victory that they had managed to survive, protect him, and resolve the mess he would cause. She was ready to do whatever she asked. A portal appeared next to her, and Farron told the lady that a message had been received from scouts. The master was in trouble. She laughed and asked, "Has this already happened?" "Well, money-hungry holy maiden, it's time to get to work." At the same time, the Titan serpent began to attack them, but Lazar used magic, teleported the protagonist to himself, and got him stuck in the ground. He looked at the monster with a smile, before using a skill, and said with a smile how cruel his abilities were. He used the skill and killed the monster, and he stood nearby and said that he didn't even think that the two of them could really handle it. He came closer and asked, "It seems that the eyes of this monster are selling for a lot of money, right?" He looked at the notebook and said, "What is written here? The rest of the materials are also selling for good money. What will they do?" He said that one will have to stay on guard, and the second one will go get a cart or a pack horse. However, someone called them. They turned around and the guy asked how their precious mood was. He looked at them, realized that they were adventurers, and asked what they needed. He asked them not to strain themselves so much, looked around and noticed the corpse of a Titan snake next to them. He came closer, put his elbow on his shoulder, and said that this is a monster that even first-class adventurers have to tinker with. MC removed his hand from himself and asked if they don't need anything. "They can go?" he asked. "He's a newbie, right? He's not going to show respect to his elders?" He said that he was unlucky, because he can't stand hierarchy, especially when the elders are also rude. The adventurer said that they should clarify just in case. Does he even understand the situation? If they don't want to get hurt, then they should leave the loot and leave. It's a useful experience, isn't it? Life isn't that sweet. It's better to listen to your elders. Members of his group came to them, asked for forgiveness, and said that they should try harder next time. They could at least complain to the guards. It won't do any good. After all, they are their friends. Also, calling for help is useless. They've already checked. There's no one around. With a calm expression on his face, he called Lazar and asked if he heard what they were saying. He calmly said that it's even better this way. The work will be easier. He used his magic and teleported them to different places. Naruto crawled out behind the archer and stabbed her in the back. He knocked her to the ground and dealt another blow. He crawled out from behind another adventurer and quickly stabbed her in the throat with a knife. The adventurer was scared by this and started to run away, and he picked up a bow and said that they were well equipped. He took it in his hands, began to aim, fired, and hit the adventurer in the leg. However, he was aiming for the stomach and said that this thing was difficult to shoot. The wounded adventurer was horrified by this and asked what was wrong with these people. They hadn't even laid a finger on them yet, and besides, they attacked a woman. Naruhito, looking confused, agreed and said that in any case, it was either a man or a woman. Lazar called him by name and asked what they would do. He said that it seemed like they did this all the time and didn't want them to bother him again or hold a grudge. He suggested killing them all, and the adventurers were surprised by this, started running in different directions, and loudly asked, "Have you lost your mind? They haven't done anything yet." He said they pointed guns at them and tried to steal their loot. That's enough to be considered robbers. Even by adventurer law, taking someone else's loot is a serious crime, punishable by death. He killed the adventurers, except for one with a bow, threw away the weapon, and asked, "But that's strange, right? Compared to other crimes, does he get most annoyed by those who steal, resell, or extort?" The wounded adventurer started crawling away and begged him to stop. The two of them walked toward him, and the protagonist took the sword, asked for forgiveness, and said that if he were stronger, maybe he could neutralize them without killing them. If he were a little braver, maybe he could leave them alive. However, he's not like that. He's weak, so he can't neutralize the enemy without killing him. He remembered the children and said with a serious expression that he was a coward. Therefore, if he leaves him alive, he will be terribly afraid that he will take revenge. He was surprised by this, knelt down and said loudly that he would not do such a thing. So he asked to let him go. He had a family, he could not die in such a place. He looked at him with a cold gaze and said that one does not interfere with the other. He cannot be left alive. He swung his sword and said that he was too late. However, he did not have time to strike because someone quickly ran towards them and loudly asked them to stop. Storu stopped in front of them and he asked in a confused tone, "What was that?" She said loudly that she swears by the wings of an angel. As a proud knight of the angelic church, the first knight, she cannot turn a blind eye to this atrocity. MC was surprised that she was pointing at him, asked for forgiveness and asked, "Did she just fall from the sky?" She said in a cheerful voice, "The fact that she fell from the sky is a mere trifle." She pointed her finger at them again and said loudly that first there was the matter with the crows, then the murder of the guards at the church gate, and now another incident. They didn't listen to his pleas for mercy at all, did they? This can't be done. He must treat people with mercy. So it is said in the words of the angel. Understand? He turned to Lazar and said that some dangerous madwoman had appeared. She began to look around with a worried look and asked loudly, "Where is this dangerous madwoman?" They can rest assured, as long as she is here, everything will be fine. He considered her the type of person you don't want to mess with, called him and said that he wanted him to talk to her for him. He turned away and said that he was busy now, coming up with a bread recipe. She said that as the first night, she almost succumbed to their skillful rhetoric. The adventurer asked loudly, "Did she just say first night? After all, she is the main fighting force of the angelic church, the strongest knight of the order." She said with slight surprise that he was well informed. "That is true. She is the best knight of the order of the angelic church." She gave her name, and they immediately realized that it was better not to provoke her. The adventurer crawled up to her, loudly asked for help, and said that these killers want to kill him. She trusted him and said that it was terrible. He must tell her more. What did they do? And is he okay? He said loudly that they killed his comrades, even those who begged for mercy, and even a woman. That's right, family. They threatened to kill his family. She called this act terrible, turned to them, and loudly said that they should stand still. They are suspected of a crime. She claims the right to enforce the law, granted to her by the angel and His Majesty the Emperor. Naruhito said that she knew surprisingly complex words. Lazar politely called her and asked if she would listen to their side as well. Storu was surprised by what she heard and agreed, and the adventurer loudly said that they were deceivers who could not be trusted. After all, they were the kind of people who could easily kill a person. He gave him an angry look and asked how cleverly his tongue is spinning. Maybe he should rip it out. He asked loudly in a frightened tone. She heard that, right? He asked for her help, and she asked if they had anything to say in their defense. She placed her hand on the hilt of her sword and said that depending on the circumstances, she would have to fulfill her duty as the sword of the angelic church. He said with a calm expression that when they finished hunting, they tried to take the prey from them. There were 6 of them against the 2 of them. They simply fought off the attackers. She agreed with a thoughtful look, made a strange chain of logic and asked loudly in a worried tone, "Was there a fire?" He was shocked by this, loudly asked Lazar for help, but he again looked away and said that this cloud looked like bread. The adventurer loudly accused them of lying and asked if killing villains was not her job. He asked to kill them quickly. Storu thought about this and with a happy expression said that I understand, she is smart, so she figured out how to solve this. Now they will all answer her questions. Also, as soon as one of them lies, she will instantly kill him. It's a joke, but she doesn't like jokes and lies, so they can begin. They sensed danger from her, and she folded her hands in front of her in prayer and began to chant a spell with which she summoned a creature called Justice. She suddenly became extremely serious and, at the same time as the creature, told the adventurer that he must tell the truth. Question: did they try to take their hunting prey from them and were rebuffed? If he doesn't answer the question, will it be considered a lie? Is he evil? She called him to answer. He hesitantly began to say something, but she instantly sensed that he was about to lie. The magical noose around his neck began to tighten, and she said in a serious tone that he was a sinner, and sin is evil, deserving death. She regretted this, said goodbye to him, and called him Master Liar. After that, she turned to them, abruptly returned to her normal state, and said that they did not need to be so wary. The liar had already been found, so they were innocent. Retaliation against illegal actions on hunting grounds is fully recognized by imperial law, so there was no need to worry. She apologizes for wasting their time. Then she will go, because she is busy looking for a person. She was very surprised when she noticed the body of the Titan snake, and said with surprise that it is clear, there really will be those here who will want to take it from them. The protagonist asked, so, can they go? Lazar said to the proud knight of their church, may the light of an angel dwell in her sword. Storu thanked him and said that they know the angelic church well. She wished them a good hunt. They began to leave, and he, looking tired, quietly said that she was incredibly dangerous. However, she followed them and asked if perhaps they should wait a little. They introduced each other with worried faces, and she asked if she could take a little more of their time. He refused with a displeased expression, and he asked, he's still quite kind, right? She said that now she was pursuing one person, the perpetrator of the recent massacre in the slums and the murder of the guards that had just recently occurred at the Eastern Gate. They looked at each other silently, and she called on Justice again and said that they shouldn't make such scary faces. It was fine. She wouldn't take up much of their time. They just needed to answer her question honestly. He asked with a worried look, "What is this?" She said that it was a system, a sacrament. They were adventurers after all, and they should know. This was the limit of talent, where the skill bestowed upon the chosen one combines with the miracle of an angel and takes on a new form. So in the name of justice, she, the first knight of the angelic church, would ask him a question about the massacre in the slums and the murder of the guards at the eastern gate that had just recently occurred. According to her colleague Clayday, these were murders committed with determination and conviction. The killer was also clearly accustomed to killing. Even when people die before his eyes, he didn't flinch at all. He's also a cold person, unmoved by the death of others, right? MC pointed at himself with a confused smile and asked if he was really a suspect. She agreed calmly and said that his skill, with which he dealt with 6 adventurers without a single scratch, albeit third-rate ones, and the very fact that they eliminated them without hesitation, she was very interested in this. He thought that it looked like retribution had come for doing whatever they wanted since yesterday. An angel's miracle, kindred spirits of death. What kind of fantasy is this? Although this is it. He thought that since there were no satellites and surveillance cameras here, it was enough to get rid of the witnesses. The situation could not be worse. He doesn't know how exactly it works, but she most likely knows how to recognize lies. The result is a corpse nearby. Storo asked if something happened to him. His face turned pale, but there was no need to worry. He just had to answer her question honestly. She used a funerary object, the gallows sword, and simultaneously asked the creature if he was evil, in the name of justice, to establish the truth. Has he killed people since he came to the city? The system announced that a warning, the justice interrogation has begun. It is capable of recognizing the lies of others. This power does not confirm what actually happened, but recognizes the truth or falsity of the answer to the question asked. She seriously called him to answer and asked if he could not answer. Silence would be considered a lie. He looked at her with a sly grin, activated the skill, and the system announced that since his alignment was neutral evil, a special dialogue began. He must answer honestly during the creature's interrogation. He confidently said that he had not killed people in this city. He thought that he had killed the first one in Hellel Tower, and Alice had killed a dragon. He also only got rid of a harmful bird and harmful insects. Stora was shocked when she realized he wasn't lying. She became nervous about this, stopped using the skill, and loudly apologized. She said loudly that she had suspected him. By the way, is he okay? He asked her not to worry. Lazar approached them and called his name, saying that it seemed he was safe. He said with a smile that he was glad she believed him. It was time for them to go, right? He said, with deep respect for the noble service of the knight's mistress, they will probably take their leave. She bowed to them and said that she was truly sorry. She had completely disrupted their work. They both asked her not to worry about it, but she was on the verge of tears and said that if she interfered with upstanding citizens of the Empire and excellent adventurers, it would disgrace the name of the knightly order. Cladea would definitely scold her. She had an idea and said that as an apology, she would be responsible for transporting their cargo herself. They were confused by this, and she, with a happy expression on her face, said that they could trust her. She lifted the monster's body above her head and quickly began to tie it into a ball. She calmly held it above her head and said that they could go to the city. She walked ahead and said that the weather was nice today. Naruhito looked at her with a wary look and thought that she was probably going to go to the city with them. He wished that she would leave soon. She, with a happy expression on her face, said that it looked like a great day for hunting. He thought it was better not to mess with her. She said that being an adventurer is quite difficult. The struggle for life and battles on the line, it's just great. Lazar asked if she was interested in adventurers. She turned to them, denied it and said that she was not interested. As the sword of the church, she could not allow such a thing. He turned to him and loudly asked what he was even doing. He should stop ruining people's moods. He was upset about this and said that if so, everyone would hear it, and besides, his voice was too loud. She said with a smile that it seemed like the two of them were getting along well. She wished for this to continue forever. They thanked her with confused voices, and she said that after all, the black-haired guy and the lizard man, the combination with that very dragon slayer comes to mind. Do they know who she is talking about? That slave adventurer who killed the dragon. He quietly asked how to answer this. The protagonist said that he could calm down. He would try to change the subject. He should watch and learn his communication technique. He told her that it would be interesting to listen. Is she interested in that dragon slayer? Storu agreed with a joyful expression and said that for them, knights, this is the highest achievement. A human species that destroyed a dragon. He said that dragons are truly special. She agreed and said that as a knight of the church, she especially admires dragons. To challenge a great creature is the highest honor, and if even one of her family of lives is damaged, it means her power has left a mark on the world. That is, this is the greatest manifestation of faith, the imprint of an angel's power in the world. She said that in any world, dragons are such lofty goals. She said that this is why a dragon slayer piques her interest. If fate brings them together, she wants to fight. They tensed up because of this, and Lazar quietly asked if this is all his communication technique. He quietly apologized and said that it seemed he had failed. she said with a joyful expression that she could see the eastern gate. It feels like she has become an adventurer. It's fun. MC called her and asked why she became a knight. She said it was very simple. Exactly. She was born for this. They all live according to the angel's destiny, that's all. He thanked her for the revelation, and she said that she must admit, however, the life of an adventurer also interested her a little. Today, looking at them, she realized something. She realized that such a path could be interesting. Although she was not sure for sure. There was very little left to the gate. Lazar quietly called his name, and he said it was simple. He remembered his past life and said that such people are everywhere. Those who drive themselves into limits. Storu urged them on and said that they must make a final push. She ran very quickly towards the castle, and he, in a worried tone, loudly said that they needed to speed up, otherwise they would be left behind. A little later, they ran into the city. People were surprised when they saw the Titan Snake's corpse and said that they hadn't seen it caught in a long time. This armor with the coat of arms? Is it a church knight? However, it is not knights who are following her, but adventurers. How does she carry such a burden? Why do adventurers help church knights? And who are they? She held the body of a huge monster above her with a joyful expression and said that she was first. Naruhito looked at her with a tense look and thought that she was seriously too dangerous and very noticeable. Cladea ran into the street, called out to her, and she called out to her with a joyful expression and waved her hand. Storu ran up to her, but she began to stretch her face and angrily said that she was so stupid. She should have gone to look for the criminal. Then what is she doing here? She apologized and said that she was going to rip her face apart. She said that she shouldn't run away alone. Finally managed to find the breath of death. Now they need to find the killer of the raven. She saw the two of them next to the body of the monster and asked, "What's going on here?" She turned to them and said that something happened to those adventurers. Cladea went to them and said that it seemed her stupid colleague had caused them trouble. He denied it, but she looked at him and asked in a shocked tone, "Why are these people still with her?" She looked guilty and was about to make an excuse, but suddenly she said in a very serious tone that it was not a mistake. This man is the one they were looking for, the killer of the raven and the criminal who killed the guards at the gate. How did he live to become like this? Even dead, this is admiration. She smells an eerie smell of death. Wait, this is not so, this is a feeling. He is dead, but alive? Alive, although he should have died. What kind of person is this? It's not only him inside. Tears started flowing. She clutched her head with horror in her eyes, and Storu jumped towards him and loudly asked her not to look. She struck with her sword. The protagonist blocked this attack and she said that she was sorry.